Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of Suffolk County Council. I am Councillor Jessica Fleming, Chairman of the County Council, and I'm chairing the meeting today. Today's meeting is being broadcast live and is available to watch on the Council's website whilst we're in public session. A recording will also be available for viewing following the meeting. Members of the public and the press may also record, film or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded, in line with the Council's published guidance, and provided that due courtesy and respect are shown to others in attendance. May I remind speakers to wait for me to ask them to speak before turning on their microphone. And when you're speaking, please ensure you use the microphone correctly. Speak into it directly so that you can clearly be heard on the audio recording and the webcast. Please avoid holding your papers or placing IT equipment in front of the microphone, as this will affect sound quality. I would also ask that you avoid talking with colleagues whilst speaking. Whilst speakers are addressing the chamber. May I remind you also to turn your mobile phones, laptops and other devices to silent if you haven't already done so. I am not anticipating any emergencies this afternoon, but please familiarise yourselves with the fire escapes and listen for any instructions in the event of an emergency. At the end of today's meeting, please could I request that councillors remain seated until you hear the gavel to confirm the meeting has closed. The first item on today's agenda item 1, is Suffolk in Focus, and I'm delighted to welcome Colonel Andrew Smith, ACF of the Suffolk Armed Forces Commissioner. Colonel Smith has dedicated over 30 years to voluntary service, supporting young people, veterans and the wider armed forces across Suffolk. A former regular serviceman with long-standing experience, he is the Cadet Force Adult Volunteer with the Army Cadet Force. He has mentored and safeguarded generations of cadets and Cadet Force Adult Volunteers, helping them develop confidence, resilience and leadership. He is chair of the SSAFA Suffolk, leading county-wide welfare support for service personnel, veterans and families, and guiding the branch through structural change while maintaining continuity of support. As Suffolk's Armed Forces Commissioner, Colonel Smith strengthens collaboration between defence, local authorities and relevant charities to champion the Armed Forces Covenant, alongside his civic role as a parish council chairman. Yes. Councillors, it now gives me very great pleasure to ask Colonel Smith to address you all.
Hopefully the sound of the IT is working today. Excuse me, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to give a short presentation today about my role as the Armed Forces Commissioner for Suffolk and the Armed Forces Covenant. So my briefing covers three things: my role, the scale of Suffolk's Armed Forces community, and how the Armed Forces Covenant Board works with the County Council. Suffolk has one of the most significant military footprints in the country, including both UK and US forces. That brings national importance, but also local responsibilities. The Covenant is how we make sure service personnel, veterans, and their families are treated fairly across public services. My role is to be an independent advocate for the Armed Forces community and chair of the Armed Forces Covenant Board. Independence is important. It allows me to both support and challenge the system where needed. It works with councils, military units, statutory partners and charities to ensure that no one is disadvantaged because of their service, and that special consideration is given where it is justified. In short, my job is to make sure covenant commitments translate into real-world outcomes. The Covenant Board is where delivery is overseen. It meets 3 times a year and brings together military, council, health, police and voluntary sector partners. The board works to a clear action plan rather than just discussing issues. The current 2024 to 2026 plan focuses on 4 themes: awareness and communication, health and well-being, education, employment and training, and housing. The role of the board is to identify barriers, coordinate solutions, and hold organisations, including the council, to account. Suffolk's regular military presence is substantial. RAF Honington focuses on force protection and specialist policing. Watsham is a key army attack aviation base. Rock Barracks delivers specialist engineering capability. Alongside this, RAF Lakenheath, RAF Mildenhall host major US Air Forces supporting NATO and UK defence. These bases are deeply connected to local housing, schools, healthcare and transport, which is why consistent covenant delivery matters in day-to-day council services. Suffolk also has a strong reserve presence across the RAF and Army. These are trained volunteers who combine civilian life with military service. Reserves strengthen national resilience, but they also rely heavily on local employers, schools, and public services. From a covenant perspective, reserves are often where the military and civilian worlds intersect most clearly, and where local support makes a real difference. Nearly 31,000 veterans live in Suffolk. This is not a marginal issue. It cuts across core council responsibilities. The council has key levers: housing, health pathways, support for service children, and employment and skills. My practical asks are simple: maintain covenant leadership, remove unnecessary barriers, improve signposting, and continue supporting families and veterans through mainstream services. If covenant principles are embedded across the council, Suffolk will remain a county that genuinely supports those who have served. The covenant works best when it's seen not as an add-on, but as part of good public service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colonel Smith. Thank you very much. I think we all know in this room how important the armed forces are to Suffolk, how important the cadet training programme is to both the nation and to our young people. And I'm terribly grateful to you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. to agenda item 2. Chairman's announcements. Firstly, it is with much sadness that I announce 3 deaths. I announce the passing of former County Councillor Robin Vickery on the 31st of December 2025. Robin served as a Conservative councillor for 4 years, from June 2009 to May 2013, for the White House and Witten division in Ipswich. He went on to serve a further 4 years, from July 16 to June 20, for the Carlford division. Robin served on public protection scrutiny, roads and transport scrutiny, and more latterly, the Regular Scrutiny Committee, Firefighters Pension Board, Education Transport Appeals Committee. Our thoughts are with Robin's family at this difficult time. A death in service, Tracy Houston. It was with great sadness I announced the passing of Tracy Houston, Business Support Coordinator for Democratic Services, on the 26th of December 2025, following a short illness. Tracy joined Democratic Services in June 2023. She quickly adapted to working in the local government environment, becoming a very well-liked and well-respected member of the team. Tracy was always keen to learn about the reasons and background for the work of the Democratic Services and the wider council, and she was always ready to take on new tasks and support team members. I know we will miss her, and I speak for us all in offering our sympathies to her family, friends, and all who knew her. Thirdly, a death in service, Vanessa Hyland. It was with great sadness that I announced the passing of Vanessa Hyland, who joined the council as an alternative tuition service teacher within Children and Young People Services in January 2025 after a career in teaching. Vanessa was highly thought of. Her dedication to pupils was exemplary. She was a valued team member, working one-on-one with students unable to attend school. Vanessa's consideration, empathy, and understanding of pupils who were struggling with school was greatly appreciated by both parents and pupils. The team miss her contributions, her smile, and her sense of humour. I am sure councillors will join me in offering our deepest sympathies to Vanessa's husband, Andrew, and their 3 children at this difficult time. Can I ask you all to stand now, please, for 1 minute of silence and reflection? Thank you. I now turn to the next announcement, which concerns our Chief Executive. After 8 years as Chief Executive, Nicola Beach has regrettably decided that the time is right to leave Suffolk County Council. I know that councillors will wish to join me in paying tribute to Nicola's time with us, her exceptional knowledge of public service and an unfaltering desire to do the best for for the people of Suffolk, has led the organisation through an important period of change. Nicola is widely respected and well regarded by colleagues, partners and councillors, and her legacy will be enduring and deeply felt. Nicola is leaving the County Council well positioned to rise to the challenge and opportunities of local government reorganisation, that is, at the Council, not Nicola herself. Nicola's last day with us will be the 31st of March 2026, and her last council meeting will be the 19th of March, where we will be paying a special tribute to Nicola, which we are not taking the time to do today. Councillors, I know you will join me in wishing Nicola every success and happiness for her future. I announce the retirement of Wendy Reid, Senior Independence and Wellbeing Practitioner, who retired from the Council in January after an extraordinary career with adult social care. Wendy began working for Suffolk County Council in 1989. During that time, she has changed the lives of countless residents and colleagues in a variety of ways. Wendy's work with people with learning disabilities has made a profound difference, and her expertise within our specialist safeguarding teams helped to protect and empower some of Suffolk's most vulnerable residents. Wendy's compassion and professionalism have shaped and supported our services. On behalf of the Council, I'd like to thank Wendy and wish her every happiness in her retirement. That concludes my announcements. We now move on to agenda item 3, apologies for absence. Apologies received in advance are displayed on the screen. Additional apologies, Councillor McCallum. Are there any? Councillor Hudson.
Yes, Councillor Monnery and
June.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and also Elizabeth Farrow, who has, I think, quite wisely decided that a crying baby was not a useful addition to the budget.
Right. Have we got them all then? Yes. Councillor Barrow. Grand. Agenda item 4 is declarations and dispensations. Do councillors have any interest to declare in respect of today's agenda? Please note that the wording of the standard dispensation for devolution and local government reorganisation is displayed on the screen. There are none, I gather. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meetings. First, is Council content to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 11th of December 2025 as a correct record? These are shown on pages 5 to 28 of your agendas. Are there any points of accuracy? Or if no hands are raised, then I take it that these minutes are accurate and can be signed. Is Council content, you have agreed as a, by general affirmation. Is Council content to approve the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on 12th of January 2026 as a correct record? ages 29 to 34. May I take general affirmation? Thank you. We take those as agreed. I'm now moving on to agenda item 6, public questions. No public questions have been received for today's meeting. I now turn to agenda item 7, which is the main agenda item, the revenue budget for 26-27 and the capital programme for 2026 to 2029. I do bring your attention that there is a tabled paper under agenda item 7. It is simply an update from our section 151 officer following the government financial settlement, which was published on the 9th of February. And this is also online. Agenda item 7 is a report by the Chief Executive on the revenue budget. And I now call on Councillor Richard Smith MVO to move the recommendations.
Madam Chairman and colleagues, here we all are in this council chamber gathered together on this 12th day of February. You might be interested to know that it was on this day in 1809 that both Charles Darwin and Abraham Lincoln were born, continents apart, of course. In 1886, Lord Salisbury formed his second Conservative-led government. On February the 12th, 1912, the last emperor of China was forced to abdicate. And here in 1935, radar, which was invented on Orford Ness, was first demonstrated to the military by Robert Watson Watt. And finally, but poignantly, Lady Jane Grey, aged just 17, was beheaded on this day in 1554 after posing as Queen of England for just a few days, before Queen Mary and her supporters marched from Framlingham Castle to London to take the throne. Poor Lady Jane, the 9 days Queen, who lasted in power for a shorter time than even Liz Truss. Now to the here and now. A factual paper accompanied by 8 detailed appendices together give the fullest possible picture of the financial position we face after 15 years of difficult decisions and 15 years of squeezing efficiencies out of the system and 15 years of close examination of all we do and every service we deliver to see if it can be delivered differently and more cost-effectively without diminishing the effect on those who need and deserve the very wide range of services delivered by this county council. But the budget has been balanced and is presented for debate today. It's just about impossible to propose further frontline changes or reductions in service, as frankly there really is precious little to propose by way of service reductions. But our transformation work has to continue. Adult social care has led the way this year in meeting and overachieving on their allotted cost savings. And they go into 26-27 confident that they will again achieve in full what is asked of them. The Children and Young People's Directorate have had a more difficult year, but have still been able to achieve significant savings in service delivery at the same time as undergoing wholesale system-led changes. I highlight these 2 areas because, of course, there are big spenders, accounting with public health for over 77% of all we spend. Now, in our proposed budget of a net £850 million spend across Suffolk, that means a social care spend of £655 million of that total. And that translates to over £12.5 million every week. It's primarily for this reason that I have to stress that budget discipline is vital for the forthcoming financial year. In 24-25, we managed to keep within the budget set. But in 25-26, demand pressures reached much higher levels than anticipated, and it's likely we'll conclude the financial year in under 7 weeks' time with an overspend of around £15 million, or roughly 2%. This is just about as much as this authority can cope with, given our diminishing reserves and other financial pressures imposed on us. Next year, the penultimate year of Suffolk County Council before its transformation into either one Suffolk or 3 unitary authorities, a decision we should know in the next month, I have to emphasise very clearly that adherence to the set budget must be achieved. I believe this actually will happen because of our first-class staff across all directorates who will understand this and play their part in ensuring this is delivered. Meanwhile, our Head of Financial Services and Section 151 Officer, Louise Ainsley, and I will be constantly and closely monitoring progress. I do not envisage imposing in-year reductions to keep the budget on course, but that scenario cannot be totally ruled out. And of course, there are other big pressures too. We cannot allow the vast volume of work that will be necessary to achieve local government reorganisation to distract us. We know all too well that our services have to continue to be delivered to Suffolk citizens at the standard you and they expect, whilst this extra burden of work is undertaken. Yes, a more efficient and cost-effective unitary system will emerge, with considerable savings if the one unitary model is chosen, but between now and then lies a huge burden of work, which will undoubtedly lead to the recruitment of extra skilled staff, perhaps on fixed-term contracts, in the run-up to the demise of this authority. I have mentioned Louise Ainsley, with whom I work closely, and from whose knowledge and advice I benefit greatly. Her deputy, Andrew Philby, is also a vital cog in the machine, and his work during the last year, especially on our capital budget, has been extensive and much appreciated. It's right that they're both thanked publicly today. May I here add my very special thanks to our Chief Executive, Nicola Beach, who will be leaving us at the end of March in contemplation of a less pressured lifestyle. For the last 2 years, while I've occupied my present role, Nicola has been unstinting in her efforts to help where and whenever possible. On top of her other duties, I must say how much I've appreciated this close interest. Nicola, perhaps I can be allowed to say on behalf of us all how much we will miss your presence amongst us and express our thanks to you for all you have done over your 8-year tenure, not just in the finance area, but for the good of Suffolk County Council and the people and businesses of Suffolk. We will all miss Nicola, but there will be another occasion when we can more properly say an extensive thank you and goodbye. A net revenue budget of £850 million is certainly a lot of money. Our capital budget is large also, and spend of over £130 million is anticipated in the next 12 months. But I admit that overall this is not enough. We could easily spend a further £150 million, bringing the desired spend total to £1 billion. But I much regret to say that this thinking is just confined to la-la land. All of our service areas could do with a further injection of funds, but this just isn't possible. This year, and I say this with regret, we're increasing the amount we ask Suffolk citizens to pay by 4.99%, the maximum we can levy, with 2% earmarked for social care costs and the other 2.99% for all of our other services and costs. I never like increasing council tax, and my record proves that. And I remember fondly the mid-2010s when for 4 successive years we didn't increase the county council share of council tax by 1 penny. Such a freeze is impossible in today's circumstances, partly following on from the massive costs of the COVID epidemic, seemingly so far away, but actually as near as just 4 years ago, and due to the existential threat of ever-rising demand for special educational needs and disability services for our younger people, combined with the demographic pressures known but seen more severely in a county like Suffolk from the needs of rising numbers of elderly people, of which I'm becoming one much faster than I would wish. Now, it is useful to quote, and I have the article here, from an article in this month's First, the Local Government Association Journal, penned by the Labour chair of the LGA, Councillor Louise Gittings, and she says this: the government's wider agenda, including to send and adult social care, presents an opportunity to reset the system. We welcome these opportunities, but they must go hand in hand with a recognition of the financial realities councils face. Otherwise, we risk redesigning services without giving councils the resources they need to make those reforms work on the ground. Well said, and Councillor Gittings clearly has influence in areas where I have none, because earlier this week we had 2 welcome financial announcements from government. First, the pledge this autumn to remove 90% of our accumulated designated schools grant debt, amounting in our case to close to £150 million. With that welcome move will come a notable reduction in our borrowing costs, helpful to our revenue budget. And I have to say the second of these announcements is the details of the final local government financial settlement, which allocates nearly £5 million more than we were expecting. Of course, I welcome these funding uplifts and their consequences. But because we were using £6 million from reserves to balance the forthcoming year's budget, our immediate instinct is to apply these funds to help reduce the depletion of our reserves, which are at near minimum levels. But this also gives me the opportunity to consider using a proportion of these new funds to enhance our revenue budget, perhaps by helping highways to cope with the wet weather-related repairs needed to our roads. And I will talk further with Councillor West about this. I hope no councillor will expect me to take a definite decision in the 3-day window I've been given leading up to my speech today, and you all have a briefing note in front of you that explains the situation. However, we do need more time to consider if we can make minor changes, so the budget proposals laid for consideration today still stand. I now need to refer to the practice established on the instructions of our monitoring officer that I cover in my speech the carbon budget, even if that area isn't really my responsibility. The words I now utter have been supplied to me by Councillor Rout, and I hope if there are questions or comments that he may be able to pick these up and reply during his speech later this afternoon. Since 2019, this council has approached decarbonisation investments on an invest-to-save basis, ensuring outlays are outweighed by cost reductions, akin to household upgrades like LED bulbs or loft insulation. This strategy has proven especially effective amid volatile energy prices. In the last year, SCC consumed just 60% of the gas and 65% of the electricity used in 2019-20, slashing energy bills by over £4.5 million each year compared to projections. Since 2019, this work has used £3.4 million from our reserves, with total costs of over £14 million, supplemented by a further £3.4 million in grants and £7.8 million in government Salix finance, which is available to improve energy efficiency, reduce carbon emissions and lower energy bills. Savings generally have surpassed borrowing costs, yielding net gains at minimal or no expense. Key measures span the estate, with LED lighting upgrades delivering the largest impact. Recent solar installations, such as the canopy at Beacon House and at Stowmarket Library, now generate electricity equivalent to 15% of building consumption, reducing reliance on purchased power. Thermal enhancements and improved controls have further cut demand. Constantine House saw a 53% drop in gas use. Endeavour House, a 33% reduction, with an additional 36% decrease across both sites this year to date. Additionally, a strengthened recommendation approved by Cabinet last month mandates that future projects demonstrate in-year savings and exceed borrowing costs, ensuring net revenue budget benefits. This Council's pragmatic focus prioritises financial realism over idealistic targets or moral imperatives, delivering ongoing taxpayer savings. As to the broader carbon budget, SCC is revising its pathway, acknowledging the Council's dissolution in 2028. Post-closure reductions fall to a successor entity or entities. Efforts have centred on Scope 1 and 2 emissions under our direct control and yielding tangible savings, while Scope 3 emissions remain challenging to monitor and influence externally. Now back to my comments. This is the 6th budget that I've had the honour to present. It's perhaps a platitude, but also too true, that I think I've always said that each budget has been the hardest to compile in the prevailing difficult economic circumstances. But the recent announcements to which I referred earlier have given us a small breathing space, and it's always good to have to deal with the consequences of having a little more money rather than less money. If I'm around in another year's time to propose my 7th budget in the known 54-year history of this Council, I expect I'll be repeating the same message, as surely times will still remain financially challenging. The very last budget of this authority in February 2028 will be put together and proposed by the shadow authority or authorities to be elected in May 2027. It or they will assume the task of planning for the unitary future. For me, from April 2028, retirement beckons. And if still a little distance over the horizon, I do look forward to the time when I'll be able to put my feet up and spend more time with my book collection, even if not, alas, with my greatly loved tortoise who died in November and whose presence I miss very much. Well, it's said, I don't believe many Cabinet members for finance across England will get a mention of tortoises into their budgets. I put before you, all in great detail, the balanced budget proposals for the financial year 26-27. In doing so, I've mentioned briefly our highways. GHI's juggling act to stay close to budget is noted and admired, as is that of our other directorates, all backed by individual and collective staff action, overseen by a first-class cadre of senior officers and my fellow Cabinet members, with whom it is a pleasure to work on a daily basis. But I must single out the leader of this Council, Matthew Hicks, for his inspiring leadership. He doesn't know this is coming. For his inspiring leadership and for the sheer volume of hard work he undertakes every day, including weekends, on behalf of this Council. Last year, he was elected as chair of the County Councils network, requiring yet more time and commitment, but from which Suffolk benefits because of the broader contacts he makes within the local government world and, importantly, also within the corridors of Whitehall. It is an honour for me to serve as his deputy leader, and I can assure you that our working relationship is good and focused on what Suffolk County Council can and must do in its final 2 years to the benefit of all who live and work in our special county. He's not often thanked for what he does, but I want to do that plainly and publicly today. Thank you, Matthew. Madam Chairman, this is a pro-budget, last paragraph, which demonstrates with the right leadership, backed by talented and committed staff, this council can be promised that its last 2 years of existence will not be problematical or marked by procrastination, but will be proximate to those we represent and marked by productiveness, prodigiousness, professionalism, and will be progressive in all it seeks to achieve. Today's budget proposals, which I proffer to councillors, are the best that can be promoted in times that continue to be challenging, but they are designed to be proportional as well as being protective where necessary and to aid the continuing prosperity of all. And they deserve profound, proud, and proven support from all parts of this chamber today.
Thank you so much, Councillor Smith. A very long and moving discussion of what appears to be a very progressive budget. I now call on... do you have a seconder, Councillor Smith? Councillor Hicks.
I'd like to second.
You may speak for 7 minutes.
I'd like to reserve my right to speak, please.
Now, in accordance with the Council's rules of procedure, an amendment has been received. The amendment is from the Reform UK group and is proposed by Councillor Christopher Hudson and seconded by Councillor Philip Faircloth-Mutton. Councillors have been sent a copy of the amendment, and a copy is available on the County Council's website and in the chamber. Councillor Hudson, before I ask you to speak on the amendment, will you formally propose the amendment for us?
Yes, Madam Chairman, very happy to do that.
Thank you. And Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, I understand you're the seconder. May I ask you to speak on the amendment, or will you formally second the amendment? Before I ask you to speak, will you please formally second the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do second the amendments and I'll be reserving my right to speak. Thank you.
Smith, as a mover of the original motion, do you accept the amendment, Councillor Smith?
Madam Chairman, no.
Do you accept the amendment?
No, I don't.
Thank you, councillors. I now call on Councillor Hudson, who may speak for up to 15 minutes on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, colleagues. I really wanted to preface my words with a personal statement, if I may, with your pleasure, Madam Chairman. And also I'd like to thank colleagues. I used the term useful idiots at a previous meeting. This was a metaphorical and alliterative use of words attributed to Lenin, the communist leader, useful idiots. I would like to make it very, very clear, through you, Madam Chairman, that my intention was in no way that this should be extended to any member of this council. And I would like to apologise accordingly for any misunderstanding. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
So, May I first of all thank Richard Smith for that very bookish, no, I mean it in a very good sense, because I know that he's a bibliophile in every sense of the word. And I can see the amount of work that has gone into that. And I'd also like to put on record the responsible financial officer's help through Louise Ainsley and through other colleagues here in the chamber, and indeed other officers who work very hard to make sure that we get the figures before us today. As we know, to govern is to choose. It's often said. Everything that we do here, or many of the things that we do, are political. And one of the most political things is to set this budget. Yes, with advice. Yes, with guidance. But we do so on behalf of our shareholders. And our shareholders in this case, and we are running virtually £1 billion company here as directors, are the ratepayers. And you will know, no doubt, Madam Chairman, they are hurting. They don't have bottomless pockets, nor do we. But they've got to that state in dominoes now where they're knocking on the table. I give you as an example the closed businesses in the High Street in Ipswich and elsewhere. I give you those voids in areas of Lowestoft, for example, and throughout this county where people can't pay, not necessarily won't pay, they can't pay. And therefore life is becoming extremely difficult for our fellow citizens in the county. This we know. And I have to tell you, it really isn't reasonable. It really isn't fair. It isn't legitimate, I would say, to keep belting them at 5% per year. They haven't got the funds, Madam Chairman. And to add insult to injury, we have things that you can't easily put a price on, like the right to vote. They've had that snatched away from them for a second year. What price do we put on that? It may be an intangible, but it is germane to this debate, because on the ledger book, the price of democracy is priceless. And yet, it has been snatched away from them, and they are hurting on that front as well. No taxation without representation, I think our American colleague said. How close are we to that again? Taxation without representation. Make no bones, and everybody should know this, and indeed I'm sure colleagues do. They are feeling the pinch. It's very difficult, if not impossible in my case, to sit here and vote through another 5% on our hard-pressed residents, because they have not got the resource, aka money. You can put it on a credit card, which is what the government does. Think carefully as directors of this county that you do not have, going forward, the funds to sustain spending. Thank the Lord that the government has moved in to at least relieve us with SEND, which would have bankrupted this county without question. I'm so happy that that's the case, so that the most vulnerable, and that's whom we should be here to represent, of course, will be protected. So I put that on the ledger as well. And it doesn't show anywhere the cost of democracy and the denial of democracy. When my ratepayers tighten their belts, then it is incumbent upon us to tighten our belts as well. If they're hard up, then we have to reflect that in the way that we conduct ourselves in what we spend. Who can, hand on heart, say that there can't be a few more pennies saved? Have we really looked as deeply as we can? I do not question for one moment the integrity of Councillor Smith and the officers to look through it, and indeed that it must confer with all the laws. But when push comes to shove and you get to the checkout and you have £50 in your pocket and £100 of goods, you either reach for a credit card or you put the gear back on the shelves. That's the stage which our ratepayers are at. It could not be more serious, ladies and gentlemen. And unless we have the common decency and the common sense and the suitability to look for compensationary savings across the board, then we will not be forgiven. But of course we will be forgiven because we don't give them the chance to vote. I wonder whether they would forgive us if we put the rates up without asking their permission. Are we for it? What price on elections, eh? To face the public. They're the shareholders. It's their money. We don't have a penny piece ourselves. We are in a fiduciary role. That's a question of trust. There could be no greater trust placed in us than to look after those who are most vulnerable in the county, and we must look after the money in people's pockets. As a famous man once said, it should be allowed to fructify in the pockets of the people and not spent by here today and gone tomorrow politicians. If only they could go tomorrow if there was an election, but that's not to be. So, compensatory savings. One could say to the Chief Executive and the responsible financial officer, please go forth and come back in 3 months with 20% savings across the board, please. You may not like what you hear, but it would be nice to see that illustration as to where that money could be saved. Are we overmanned or overwomaned? Do we have too much workforce? Notice that the transformation programme needs looking at as well. One of the biggest transformations we're living through. They're getting rid of us. How to save a lot of money in one go. Bang! We're gone. That's a good saving. The government's been thinking outside the box. Isn't it time that we did? Because if we don't think outside the box, we're down the road anyway, because they're getting rid of this wonderful 5-story illuminated little house. Some love to work from home, and I think if we could have a compromise, perhaps 3 days a week at home, 2 here in the office. 5 days working at home, no. Because you miss out on so many things, socialization, seeing your friends, and from what I read and what I see, not here in our authority, to my knowledge, it's not a good thing to work full-time from home. People need that socialization and to work here. Are there savings there that are consequent? I don't know. I don't have a copy of all the figures before us. All I have is something that is presented to me. It isn't funny, Councillor Hicks, it's very
order,
serious.
Please, order in the chamber, councillors, leaders.
Don't laugh, let's listen to the people, and they are very concerned because they haven't got the right to remove you this year. Or me. But that's not through my will. That's through the government.
You abstained on the vote. Didn't. We voted.
I did not abstain on it. However, let's stick to this. I'll be able to write to colleagues and explain to them. They're in the invidious position of asking our ratepayers to pay money that they haven't necessarily got. It's not working anymore. You're not listening. You haven't got your listening ears on. There's not the resource there. They've had enough. Now, senior management and corporate overheads. Perhaps we may have to consider the very difficult things about sharing jobs, sharing tasks, putting a freeze on senior management salaries. £100,000, £200,000 a year. It's an incredible amount of money for our ratepayers out there. They can't afford it. Very serious. No laughing matter, Councillor Hicks. Deadly serious. We also have the whole idea of implementation accountability. We've got to face those people on the door and say to them, we've spent this. Don't argue, pay up. What they do is, they can't pay, they won't pay, and at the end of it, of course, you then have a situation where businesses fold. I could go around today with Councillor Back and colleagues from Lowestoft, and I would see shop after shop that's closing, and people in business are bleeding every day, particularly in the hospitality industry, because their businesses are closing, and we get nothing. What are we going to do about that? I know what we'll do. We'll belt them with another 5%. No. We have reached a time where we do not have, we've run out of other people's money. That's the quote, is it? Yes. We've run out of other people's money. And even the money we are spending is borrowed by the incompetents in Westminster. Borrowed money, which we're now paying, of course, in the bond market. Virtually 5% money. Again, unsustainable. Take what you will. Take what you will, but pay the price. And the price is democracy. This is a political decision, ladies and gentlemen. It is not a dry and dusty or bookish set of numbers. This is a political decision. I warn, I admonish you, be aware. The people are listening, the people are watching, and they will rise up and vote accordingly. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Bravo.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, as seconder of... Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wish to reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes. I will now open the debate on the amendment. I would... Sorry. I'm about to open the debate on the amendment. I would just remind councillors that Councillor Smith, as holder of the substantive motion, may speak for up to 5 minutes at any point in the debate. Any other councillor, including group leaders, may speak for up to 3 minutes each. If you wish to speak, please signal to myself and the monitoring officer. The debate is now open. We have Councillor Noble. You have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Over the past 19 years, I've stood here and given the odd budget speech occasionally, and I riled in those early days against the horrific 18.5 and 11.9% council tax rises by the misadministration of Labour and their cohort of Lib Dems. And I absolutely back lower council tax. I absolutely agree with what is said about people's hard-earned money. But those days are gone. Times have changed. We have, in this council, had 7 years of 0% council tax, something I proposed as Cabinet Member for Finance and then as leader saw us implement. And at the same time, we went through significant changes here, redundancies and efficiencies. But those times have changed. When you look at this book here, and Councillor Hudson, you do have the figures, they're here. When you look through that, you realise the thousands of man-hours of work, the ever-increasing complexity of the services we deliver, and the ever-increasing number of vulnerable people that rely on those services. And so it is proposed that we put through 4.99%. Now, I've also stood up with you beside me, Councillor Hudson, and I've riled against Councillor Stringer. I looked up some of my old speeches, and one of the things I said, did your dog eat your homework and you couldn't actually propose anything? And once for Councillor Martin, I said, did you run out of time? Did you not realise it was today when you didn't actually put anything meaningful through? So, Councillor Hudson, I was expecting so much more. I was expecting detail. But what I got was not even one side of A4. I got 2 suggestions. One, mythical redundancies in the back office, something to do with duplication of district councils. Well, we don't duplicate what the district council do. We do what we do here and they do what they do there. So, that one. And then another one about sick leave. And that's going to save £4.6 million, which is the 0.99% you're proposing. It just doesn't work, Councillor Hudson. So we have seen across this country last year, Reform come in with Doge, and they're going to sort everything out, and they're going to come up and find all the fraud and all the savings. And across this country, most of their councils are putting it up by 4.99, and even more horrifically, some have asked government for permission to put it up more for that. So I was expecting so much more, Councillor Hudson, and I will not be voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Otten, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have stood here on numerous occasions going through various budget discussions. I have certainly heard the 18%. I was not actually there at the time, but it comes up every time. So thank you, Colin. I'd be really upset if you didn't bring that up. Looking at this amendment, it just occurred to me, Councillor Hudson, first of all, I'm not sure you're in the real world. You're talking about people who can't afford to pay their council tax and anything else. And yet you go on to say, and I quote, they are so hard up that they have to put their beer back on the shelf. Now, if they are suffering that much, it's not beer that would be in their trolley, it would be bread. On the amendment, he said beer. Well, that's even worse.
Please move on, everyone.
It's just on the amendment, on this ridiculous statement, redundancies in back office. As many of you know, I have actually been the spokesperson for young people, but I also want to refer to adult and social care, because redundancies in the back office teams for adult and social care and for young people would take away the precious time that the actual social workers, the teams that are actually doing the work on the ground to support those in care, our adults who are needing extra care at home. And I actually believe that that is a very, very short term and a poorly proposed amendment. So I will not support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought when I first of all saw this amendment that it might be a little bit more full-throated. You only have to turn on your television set, sadly, and see the smiling national leader of their party, who seems to live in an Alice in Wonderland world in terms of what actually finances are like. I thought at least they might lead us into a further and more fanciful world and perhaps propose a 2% reduction or something, but they've sort of nibbled around the edges. But what really got my goat in Councillor Hudson's speech was this continuing cant about elections denied. 3 out of the 4 members over there scuttled from my party to their party. Did they consult the ratepayers in their divisions as to whether they approved of the choice that they had unilaterally made? Did they? Hell. 3 out of the 4 of you have no right to talk to any of us about elections because you're sitting on some other party's majority. The The other thing is that 3 out of the 4 of the members sitting there, to my certain knowledge, have voted for 4.99% or nearby figures over several years gone by. Not Councillor Robinson. You are both legitimate in your mandate and you didn't so vote. But the other 3 have suddenly found that their financial probity of previous years is replaced by something else. Because there is an irony here. They are in opposition, severely so, and not with the other opposition, I suspect, and they are proposing, inviting us on specious grounds with no data, no argument around facts as to how you would actually achieve even that 0.99% reduction. I fear, everybody, that were they actually in the administration, they would do something completely different. They would be inviting us to consider a 9% council tax increase, which is good enough for Nigel Farage and their colleagues in Worcestershire County Council. So I think it's unthought through fun and games by 3 out of 4 people who shouldn't be in this chamber other than having come here through a by-election. Thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you. I think the term Councillor Nichol is born again for some of our colleagues. I am not in favour of increasing council tax as a principle, and I think most people on that side of the chamber actually is as well, because we are Conservatives, even though I'm sitting here. But I read this and it reminded me of a life before this. Many, many years ago, I used to work in the city as a junior broker. And this is a blast from the past because it was as women were just allowed in Lloyd's and we were treated a little bit differently to the men. I'd like to think it's all been cleaned up now. But a broker would come into the office drunk and he would throw me a fag packet and he'd go, make this legal. And it would be some form of agreement between a ship owner and the underwriters and whoever was partaking in some form of club at midday. And they would say, make this legal, and we would have to try and make it legal. This feels to me like a fag packet and make this legal, because no one you haven't explained, this was a journey, your 15 minutes was a journey, don't get me wrong, but it was like the journey in the car with my daughter who never has an end to a story. But you never actually explained what this means. So when you say, get back to work drive to reduce levels of long periods of sick leave, what does this actually mean? Does that mean that we're going to cause problems for people, our members of staff, who may experience sickness? Because sickness can happen at any time. I've got a very close friend of mine whose husband has never had a day off work, and about 3 years ago, suddenly couldn't move. We were due to go on a girls' weekend, and I thought he was faking it so she couldn't go. But actually, 3 years later, turns out, if he is faking it, he's doing a good job of it. He cannot leave the house. So what are we doing? Are these linked? Are the redundancies going to be our sick? Because that's a dangerous level. I had a look through at certain laws that you would need to overcome. So in order to achieve this, because based on this information and no information you've been given, you would need to go through the Equality Act, the Public Sector Equality Duty, Section 149 of the Equality Act, Employment Rights Act of 1996, Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations of 1999, Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act of 1992, Local Government Finance Act 1992, Local Government Act 2003, and the Human Rights Act of 1998 to get even close to achieving this. You guys know better. You should have done some form of research.
Councillor Bird.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. We've got this amendment here, and we heard the passionate speech from Councillor Hudson, so an observer might take the indication from that they're concerned about the burden for the taxpayer and perhaps ought to be sitting on this side of the chamber. Of course, some of them used to, actually, didn't they? But it was only recently, of course, we heard Reform supporting the massive burden that's going to be put upon the taxpayer by the enormous rise in universal credit benefit, as proposed by many over there. So perhaps that's the side of the chamber that you should be sitting on. Perhaps until Reform UK can decide which side of the political divide they're on, it's appropriate that they sit in the middle of the council chamber. I mean, I suppose it could be said that such vacillation and inconsistency of policy is only to be expected from a populist party that wish to be all things to all voters. But turning to the amendment, it's already been highlighted. I mean, overlooking, of course, that you can't even get your grammar correct in there, but it's already been highlighted, the utter dearth of detail and costings to make this credible or believable. But your sentiment is that you wish to make savings from the duplication in local government. Well, I've got good news for you. I can offer it to you in shed loads. The way you can make a huge saving for the taxpayer through duplication of local government is you can support the proposal from this administration for one unitary government for Suffolk. Conversely, of course, you wish to condemn utter waste and cost to the taxpayer of duplication in local government. Of course, if you want to support that, you can support the nonsense of splitting up into three every single department and every single directorate in this council, and you can support the proposal for 3 unitary local government as proposed by many over here. So that's your choice. If you're really concerned about waste and duplication in local government, come back over to this side of the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Sauer.
Thank you very much, Chair. I believe just some of the comments already have given us new voters. Thank you very much for your comments. Now my speech. With our motion, Reform UK will prevent the largest council tax increase proposed by the Conservatives. Time and again, they, like their friends in Westminster, show that their only answer to balancing the books is squeezing more money out of hard-working residents. What they have not done is lobby their MPs or engage directly with the government to reform the statutory duties imposed on councils. Despite it being painfully obvious that the current system is unsustainable, please, all fellow councillors, do understand this. At the moment, we are in a situation which is unsustainable for the future. Reform UK understands that real change is needed. Transformation must be at the heart of that change. Yet, look at the sheer number of responsibilities placed on the cabinet member for transformation. Business engagement, enterprise, development, finance, procurement, and skills. No one in their right mind would load such enormous responsibilities onto one single cabinet member and expect success. Unsurprisingly, this council has delivered no meaningful transformation. Let me speak, please. And what did Councillor Smith said? He will repeat the same message exactly. That is the problem. He will say in a year's time exactly the same. That's the problem. No change. The failure is partly because the leader has blocked fresh ideas from coming through elections, and partly because Mr. Hicks has gravely misjudged how cabinet responsibilities should be allocated. There is no balance, and without balance, there can be no progress. I have no confidence in this leadership, especially at a time when the so-called captain, Nicola Beach, of this ship, our council, will be gone in less than 2 months. Thank you. And I urge you all to... Finished? Well, you should listen.
Thank you. May I remind Councillor Sower that that actually was a point of order, because our Chief Executive has no right of reply to what you have just said. So please let's note that. Thank you. Councillor Hicks, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I mean, before I get into my speech, I'm just slightly baffled by what's going on. So you've just said there's not enough cabinet members. So what you're saying is I need 20 cabinet members, and where's the funding coming from? So on one hand, you're saying cut back office and increase cabinet. That's exactly what we don't do. You have politicians who do the hard work and deliver for our residents. You don't just pick on back office staff because you don't actually know what you're talking about. I mean, I've never heard such nonsense in this chamber in all the years I've been a councillor. Before us, an amendment that, quite frankly, from 4 people is only here to look for a cheap headline, and it's clearly that's what you're doing. Correct. I would really have expected something of substance when you submit a budget amendment, something in detail, something of depth, rather than a poorly thought out amendment which your group leader didn't even talk about anything in the amendment for 15 minutes. The senior officer team have also been very clear. Your amendment doesn't make sense and it can't be done, and they wouldn't recommend you do it. So why have you put it forward? Cheap headline. Now I'm going to focus on one point in my limited time, and that is redundancies. So I'm interested in where these redundancies are coming from, as much of the back office sits with corporate services, my area. Suffolk County Council corporate services are one of the most economical in the country, at only 5% of the budget. Most councils are either 7 or 8%. Now, I fear Reform probably don't have a grasp of these important figures and percentages. Now, I wonder why that is. Well, I covered this in great detail at the Budget Scrutiny Committee. And in early January, when Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, who was on the committee, failed to show or to find a substitute, sadly, Reform failed to show up. So that's important, because that's the time you test out where you have inquiries on things like corporate services, and you would have heard my response. But instead, no one from Reform attended budget scrutiny. No one. But of course, what happened last Tuesday? Oh, another scrutiny committee looking at the Gullwing Bridge, where we looked at the cost of running the bridge, the cost of procurement, the cost of building the bridge. Reform, again, no show. Empty seat from Councillor Philip Faircloth-Mutton. No one else substituted. So the really important committee work, where we discuss the details of budgets, you don't show up. So I absolutely conclude you've put this in here today simply to be a cheap headline, but you're not doing the legwork behind it. And what you've said today is absolutely fundamentally flawed. Correct.
Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to take issue on a different point, actually. The mover of the amendment, if I got it right, says shareholders are our ratepayers. I'd like to explore that a little bit, because I would have said residents, as this covers all who live in Suffolk, regardless of whether they are council taxpayers or not. Aren't children and young people shareholders, stakeholders and residents in our wonderful county of Suffolk? I think they are. Aren't care home residents relevant too? I think they are. So we're here to do our best for everyone in setting this budget, and frankly, this amendment is absolutely reckless.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I always enjoy listening to Councillor Hudson, in actual fact. I was disappointed today, not for the reasons expressed by my colleagues, but disappointed for the fact that he ran out of time before he was able to speak to the motion. Now, he didn't obviously mention the word redundancies for obvious reason, no doubt. So, I mean, where could these redundancies come from? Because could they come from highway inspectors who work hard behind the scenes? Could they be? We heard earlier from Councillor Smith with 655 million being spent on social care services, adults and children throughout the county. Could those redundancies fall in the back office from the fabric of the social care organisation that underpins this county council? Or perhaps if Councillor Sauer, who spoke a moment ago, has got anything to do with it, could the axe fall on our libraries? Which we have heard on occasion. So where will the axe fall if there are to be unnamed redundancies? Councillor Hudson did very briefly talk about freezes in salaries, but he didn't get on to talk about redundancies, which is actually quoted in the tabled amendment. And just to finish off, as a couple of my colleagues have said, Councillor Hudson talked about putting an extra 5% on the ledger. One thing we won't be putting on the ledger is a 9% increase as proposed by Worcestershire Reform UK.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Is this an amendment? No facts, no figures, no indication that you've even bothered to read the papers. Just a knee-jerk reaction to so-called back office teams and staff who are sick. Has there been an increase in the number of working days lost as a result of sick leave? Yes. Is it disproportionate in comparison with other councils or other organisations? No. Are the council doing what they can to deal with this situation? Yes. And if the Reform UK councillors had looked at the figures on the performance dashboard, then they would have seen that the staff on sick leave who've had a return to work interview has increased from 64% in 2021-22 to 91% in the current year. A really strong indication that this county is already taking this seriously and doing everything it can to minimise the issue. Are there reasons for the levels of staff stress? Well, yes, of course there are, and we all know what they are. The high level of recent restructuring has left many staff unsure of their roles or of whether they will still have jobs. And of course, this council will cease to exist in 2028, and that's another source of anxiety. And previous austerity measures have stripped out various roles, leaving remaining staff to pick up increased workloads and reducing the level of support and planning available to frontline staff. And of course, many of those roles were so-called back office staff. So reducing them even further, even if that were possible, which it isn't, would exacerbate the staff stress problem. The truth is, Reform UK councillors are just having a gratuitous go at the hard-working staff of this council without any indication of how it could actually save any money at all, and I think that's reprehensible.
Councillor Hopfensperger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This amendment is pure political posturing, built on poor understanding of both the LGR process and the fragile reality of this council's budget. Reform colleagues should remember that this is an administration that has constantly kept council tax rises to the bare minimum needed to deliver balanced statutory budgets. If there were any real deliverable chance of avoiding taking the maximum rise available to us, the Cabinet Member of Finance would have seized it with gusto. Absolutely. The truth is, there isn't. This amendment suggests we start by making staff redundant at the very moment we will need every pair of hands to deliver the largest transformational change of local government Suffolk has ever seen, while simultaneously keeping existing systems running until vesting day. Yes, LGR will bring future savings, especially if the government selects the right option as a one Suffolk, but those savings cannot be realised until after the decision is made and change is implemented. Reform may see staff as easy pickings, but they haven't identified what these supposing savings actually are, They haven't identified which officers they mean, what roles they currently perform, or the breadth of responsibilities many carry that go far beyond their job descriptions. And what about redundancy costs? Where has the money come to pay for those? Have they factored those into their savings? Then what about the so-called Get Back to Work scheme? Who would run it? Who would work? How would it work? What would it cost? And crucially, what money would it actually save? I want people back at work as soon as they are able. Of course I do. But what happens if they aren't ready? What happens if this scheme costs more than it saves? What then? I ask these questions as there was scant, if any, reference to this in the second part of the amendment in the proposer's speech. Madam Chairman, being on long-term sick leave is not a career path. It is not a choice. As Cabinet Member for Adult Care, I find the casual disregard shown towards people who are unwell and need support genuinely distressing. Our staff are our biggest asset. They need supporting, especially at times of need and vulnerability, not targeted at the expense of poorly thought out, uncosted political soundbites. Councillor Hudson refers to supporting the most vulnerable. Is this not sane sentiment afforded to our staff? And Councillor Sower, sorry, you sat on the transformation board. You saw the transformation ACS have made over 8 years and indeed praised us for them. 84.5 million, that's not insignificant. I think a lot better of you, Councillor Sower. I will reject this amendment. I urge colleagues to do the same.
Councillor Bridgeman.
Thank you. Well, let's start off with some good news. Thank you to the Council on behalf of Ipswich Harriers for the 350k in funding. It's a great club. It means they can have better competitions. This is what the Council's about. The Ipswich Investment Fund, whilst I thought that sounds a bit ropey at the start, I'll be fair, it's absolutely delivering. On to this. I'm not going to waste my time saying what every single person has said. I will say, Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, I was expecting miles better, much more smoother reform approach from you, but you've delivered this. I can only say the same. We've been on the scrutiny, we've gone through the books. It's not a great look. We're not going to get much better than what we've got, sadly. Would it be nice to just lower the council tax? Of course it would be. In reality, it's not going to work. As for your 1950s styled get back to work scheme, absolute rot. Don't you think they're already doing this? This is already happening. I know the get back to work gives you a little buzz to your voters that you're on it. It's already being done. So, yeah, I thought you'd have been more professional with all of this. Councillor Sower, no idea what you were going on about. Oh, and I won't be voting for the amendment.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Finch.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not sure whether this amendment recognises the conditions that the government put upon us in setting this budget. My understanding is if we didn't set the maximum 4.99% increase, we would be penalised, and I'm looking at our Chief Financial Officer, we'd be penalised against our allowance from the government. So what this doesn't make clear is that we have got a proposal here that actually will not produce a balanced budget because the government automatically will reduce some. So I can't support this amendment because what will happen is that you will need not a 4.6 million or 1%, you'd need another 2% of this budget, and therefore I cannot accept this amendment because it hasn't been worked through and doesn't recognise what the conditions the government set us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First thing I want to say is I very much support Councillor Hudson and Councillor Sower's comments. In all the responses I've heard this afternoon, there's only one councillor, Councillor Murray, who I have regard for her comments, because she actually started to address the problems. You've got to look at this, you've got to look at that, you've got to look at the other. All the rest of you, all you've done so far is put up the barricades, defended yourself. What I noticed when Councillor Hudson was talking was there's almost a shrinking back. Some of you folks over this side, you know he's right. You know he's right. So let me talk you through some numbers. We talked about numbers. I've got a few numbers, okay? I'm not as polished as these guys, but I hope you'll hear my numbers. So over the last 9 years that Councillor Hicks and Smith have been in leadership, the staffing across the council has exploded by more than 1,000 full-time equivalents. Got it? And the annual wages bill has grown from 171,800,000 to 278 million. Directly, just over this, that's just over 100 million increase in 9 years, of which 54 million is directly down to new hires. Where's the transformation? Of the balance, there's 54 million new hires. There's a balance, there's 13,500,000 due to a pay and reward agreement with Unison. Where's the payback? And there's 35 odd million is down to cost of living increases. Fair enough, we can't do much about that. So, one could hope, perhaps, for some relief on contracted out services. Wages have gone up. Contracted services gone down? Not at all, none of it. There's been no relief here because in the same period, contracted services has exploded from 239.4 million to 604 million. Yeah. A total increase of 364.6 million. Why? Councillor Hudson is absolutely right. We have got to do something. We cannot keep pushing our residents, our taxpayers, to foot the bill. So let me go on. Maybe we lowered borrowing. Maybe we did something clever there. No, over the same period, in its various forms, borrowing increased from 653.3 million to last year, 904 million. Why? So, where's the transformation project? I won't be very much longer, I promise you. Optimistically, if I pick up the budget pack, and I have been through it, it's pretty dog-eared, you'll see that in the next administration, most of which you guys won't be around to deliver, it says that you'll be saving 64 million. Very close by the page that says that is another page that says, actually, we failed to deliver 4.7 million this year. So we're not going to get it there, but it goes on. Optimistically, it goes on and says that there's a new project. So on top of transformation, we got fit for the future.
Councillor, can you just do a winding up sentence?
Yes, I will. So fit for the future. It promises it's not a problem. We didn't save to 5.7. We're going to save 25.8 million. What this tells me is that this pack is a very well-managed process of balancing budgets. It's not about genuine transformation. And what Councillor Hudson and Councillor Sowell were saying is we need transformation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's so good to see that Councillor Sowell has so quickly swallowed the reform playbook. We're used to Robert Jenrick, the former Housing and Immigration Minister, complaining, you guessed it, about housing and immigration. Here we have the former Deputy Cabinet Member for Transformation, one seat away from the other former Deputy Cabinet Member for Transformation, saying we failed on transformation. Well, I'm pleased they can spot. I'm pleased they can spot their own failure. They should spot it. They should spot it in their own.
Can I have a point of order, Madam Chairman?
I
have not said that I failed on that front in this meeting. I don't think that's an accurate statement.
Councillors, can we wait until Councillor Rout has finished, please?
Can we reset the clock? Is that okay? So I've lost a lot of time there. So Councillor Sower, you said we failed on transformation. 1 seat away from your fellow former cabinet member for transformation. But you know, there are those who might sneer at people who want to vote reform. You won't count me amongst them, actually. Immigration is too high, taxes are too high, life is too hard for too many. But the answer isn't the sort of deceit that you see in this motion. It isn't. But it doesn't surprise me that it's so filled with deceit when their new members are people who deceive so freely. People who sat amongst us as colleagues, friends even, hiding their defection for months. When you deceive that freely, it is no surprise that when you come into power, when that power comes into force, you deceive the public as well. And Reform nationally say they're going to lower council tax, but they don't. If you look to Worcestershire, as others have said, a 9% increase. Derbyshire, 4.9%. Northamptonshire, 4.9%. Warwickshire, increase. Lancashire, increase. The list goes on. You say one thing, but then do completely another. You are deceiving the public because the building blocks of your new party are people that deceive freely. Now, looking at the detail of your motion, you say it's about redundancies, but you don't say where they'll come from. You don't say that at all. In fact, Councillor Hudson barely touched on the redundancies in his speech at all. Is it the 53 people in the Registrars and Coroner Service, the 32 people in financial management, the 10 people in procurement, the 10 people in democratic services? They're all back office, Councillor Hudson. Which of them do you want to see redundant? Which of them do you think aren't necessary to the functioning of this council? And Councillor Robinson, you complain about the spiralling number of staff at this council. Well, speak to the gentleman next to you who brought in the library staff and increased that number. Speak to the gentleman next to you who was responsible for communities here, and public health came in, bringing loads of staff with them as well. Additional departments have joined this council. The gentleman next to you could tell you that, and it happened under his tenure. Speak to your colleagues, speak to them about our record, because they were here when we were delivering for the people of Suffolk. Thank you.
I'm afraid we can't take interventions. Councillor Lockington.
Thank you, Chairman. There was a sentence which came from the reform group, and that was, the current system is unsustainable. Now, if that is meant that the current system of council tax is unsustainable, yes, I think it is. And I hope that your party will help us in getting a really good form of local income tax. And then I also hope that some of the many millionaires that are backing reform today will be able to pay a proper local income tax, and then the country might be able to afford things. So I hope that will happen. Can I also talk a little bit about staff and public service? I know some of the staff who work in this council or in other councils in Suffolk. They work extremely hard. Some of them do the extra hours, Saturday, Sunday. Sorry, I can't do things because I have to work to catch up with my work, apart from working all week long. I was married to a public servant. I still am, but he is not a public servant anymore. But he was a public service for 40 years, working many, many hours. That is what we often found. And I've been a councillor for many years, and I have always been taken in by how commitment to service the public service have. And if they then happen to be ill, we need to be sure that we support them in the right to get back to work, but sometimes that support takes a time. Some of the people who are off ill may be because they have long-term illness, like cancer, like other illnesses. We need to be understandable because they for years have served the people of Suffolk, and now it's our turn to support staff if they need support.
Thank you. Sorry.
A point of order on the fact that at a previous meeting, when I was speaking, a point of order was raised by one of our colleagues on the other side. I was asked to stop so the point of order could be considered. After the meeting, I looked up the issue, and I understand that when a point of order is raised, it should be considered by the meeting before you progress. Now, whether I want to hear from our colleagues to the left or not is irrelevant. What is relevant to me is that correct procedures are followed at all times, regardless who's speaking. And I simply raise this for clarification as to whether Councillor Faircloth-Mutton should have been permitted to make his point of order at the time that he raised it.
I don't think... Councillor Faircloth-Mutton hasn't raised a point of order. Did you say the words? You did. But,
it's not about what's said, it's about the process.
Okay.
No, yes. Sorry, Councillor Stream is absolutely
okay,
right.
he's correct. Okay. Okay, everyone. On point of order, a councillor may raise a point of order at any time. The chairman will hear them immediately. I apologise, I haven't heard you immediately. A point of order may only relate to an alleged breach of these council rules of procedure or the law. The councillor must indicate the rule of law and the way in which they consider it has been broken. The ruling of the chairman on the matter will be final. So, Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, can you please outline your point of order and the rule or procedure that may have been broken?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do believe that my point of order was addressed in the meeting. It originated from the initial incorrect statement from Councillor Rouse that I had said in this meeting that I felt that transformation was a failure. I had not yet spoken in this meeting when such comments were made, and I deem them to be invalid. Councillor Rouse has since addressed them, and they are now correct on what he said with his amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm advised that your point of order is accepted.
Yeah, because it's still not spoken.
Because you had not spoken.
Sorry, Chair. I think I need to make a point of order on this. A point of order is supposed to be about the process, and I think what Councillor Faircloth-Mutton was raising was a point of personal clarification, which is totally different. And we need to get this right, because I do remember in the days of Colin over there that he would use points of order when they were personal clarification.
Right. Could everyone please, quiet. Councillors, you need to listen. Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, are you raising a point of order based on procedure or the law?
As a point of the law, yes.
As what?
That comments should be true and accurate when they are made under the rule of law. That is law.
I think this would close the debate in the chamber down very rapidly if we adhered to it. So I'm afraid I'm not inclined to allow it. Thank you very much. We will now move on. And thank you everyone for your comments and advice on this matter. We have Councillor Wiles.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll try to keep this very brief and maybe get back on track. In my role within public health, I focused on the health and well-being of our residents and, of course, our own staff. Sickness data has been mentioned. For those unsure of the work that is done here, I'd recommend a good place to start would be by reading the recently published annual Shaw report, which highlights and informs of the considerable amount of support that is available to those who are suffering ill health. helping their return to work within our authority setting. With that in mind, and the reality that this budget amendment before us has little to no detail, I wish to be clear. I'm concerned that politically motivated and what some might consider as threatening soundbites could have a very negative effect on the health and well-being of all our hard-working staff. This is not an outcome I can condone, and as such, I will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byatt.
Thank you, Chair. It's been quite a almost random debate this afternoon. Started with Councillor Smith talking about the births of Lincoln and the death of Lady Jane Grey. We've talked about cheap headlines. Well, there was a cheap headline in terms of Lady Jane Grey and her advice, or whatever advice she took. I'm really disappointed. I mean, everyone's covered the majority of things, so I'll be as brief as I can. There is no detailed list here about where we've got duplication. Nowhere at all. I've actually looked for the back offices. They're not. They're all out there where you can see them working. It's really important. But what concerns me is that we have had what I suppose seemed to be party political broadcast speeches from our colleagues over here. I almost expected, you know, the strains of Land and Hope and Glory to be piped through when they finish speaking about what we're going to be doing. Of course, they have a right to their views. We all do. But what I'm concerned about is the total lack of detail of any of this, but also, if we pass this motion, we've declared redundancies. It says here, we'll do it by getting redundancies. We have not been through any process of redundancy with our staff. So we cannot pass an amendment which says we're going to have redundancies. We've got to talk to all sorts of people. And also, we talked about the value of our staff. The colleagues here talked about the additional staff. Of course we've got more staff. We're performing many more duties as an authority that we had in the past. And the better for it. Colleagues talked about the options of whether we're going to have 1, 2, 3 unitaries. I think that's all we've got on the table at the moment. And of course, duplication. I've never seen any duplication between the district council that I serve on and the county council that I serve on. I know where to go, literally, to find out about highways. I don't go to the housing department at East Suffolk. So I don't think there is any great issue with duplication. But what I find there is it is that almost threat that as soon as a party gets into power, we're going to chop you all off at the knees just because we think that all civil servants are a waste of time. Now that to me is abominable and an awful way to talk about our staff. Secondly, this get back to work thing. Colleagues have talked about people who are long-term sick. You can't just come in and say, right, you've been off for 6 weeks, get yourself back to work, I don't care what your problems are. We talked about history earlier. There's a massively cavalier attitudes towards our workforce, towards our employees, the people who work with us and share the responsibilities for this council. It was mentioned very briefly, blaming problems in Lowestoft, and I will be parochial, the problems with the fishing industry there, blaming that on our government, blaming on your government at the time. The only thing that devastated the fishing industry in Lowestoft was Brexit. And I think we know which party favoured Brexit. And I think, you know, we do not want to see that same destruction in our county if we have the wrong people taking control. There's no detail. I totally oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Honestly, I had a speech. I've rewritten it about 2 or 3 times. I've got no idea where this is going. Genuinely, I don't know whether to condemn what I've heard, ridicule it. Frankly, I'm horrified. On a very simplistic level, I have residents saying, you know, council tax always goes up. What are we getting for it? It's a genuinely serious conversation. But this amendment, honestly, I almost don't know where to begin. It's striking how Reform UK confidently advance a case without any accompanying figures, modelling a reference to the mechanics of a budget setting process. They clearly don't let facts and figures get in the way of a soundbite. No assessment of redundancy costs. No explanation of when savings would materialise. No impact analysis. we're not debating an election leaflet. They speak of transformation, yet there's no mention of it in the amendment. If colleagues wish to reduce the precept by 0.99%, then the responsible approach is to show precisely where the 4 to 5 million gap would be closed and what the consequences would be. There's absolutely no recognition in Councillor Hudson's speech regarding the increased demand and cost that the council is under. Simply referring to back office duplication does not constitute a financial strategy. Many of those teams support safeguarding, payroll and frontline staff, procurement and compliance and the systems that keep highways, social care, children's services functioning. Nor does Get Back to Work drive amount to a costly proposal. Long-term sickness absence is usually linked to serious illness. That's a cheap shot. Or workplace pressures cannot be resolved by just asserting get back to work. It's easy to oppose an increase. It's more difficult to construct a credible alternative. If anyone needs proof today that they see that Reform UK just isn't credible, there are no boundaries. Got concerns? Turn up to scrutiny and ask questions. I'm used to grading homework as a teacher. I wouldn't bother. I'll give it back and say, try again.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. But before I start what I'm about to say, I'd just like to put it on record that I'm proud to serve a council that allows people that are ill to heal before they come fully back to work and play a vital role in delivering our services. Yeah, thank you. Right. Now, we heard earlier that we're one councillor down because the person felt that we didn't ought to have a baby in the chamber. I totally disagree. I think children should play a vital role in democracy. I wouldn't mind a baby crying in here. They probably will be howling their eyes out by now after what they've heard. But to that end, I really like Democracy Week. And I always try and make a point to see if I can get into a primary school, if they'll let me in, and bother children about democracy, because democracy is incredibly important. And when I first read this amendment, I thought this had been done by a pupil at one of our primary schools. But of course, the primary schools in Upper Gipping have way better grammar skills than you've got here. They can also add up, and they also answer the flipping exam question, which this really doesn't do. You would have seen me through Councillor Hudson's speech, poised with my pen, waiting for some nugget of truth or some area of policy, or at least an idea to come out of this motion. Absolutely nothing. And let's be absolutely plain, we already share loads of these jobs. I serve another council in this chamber called Mid-Suffolk District Council. You've probably heard of it. If you pay council tax there or claim benefits there, it has a shared revenues partnership with 2 other councils. We already have been doing this stuff for decades. Also, it feels like, rather like Back to the Playground, like what we're doing is like the bully in the playground. We're singling out a few groups of people that we know are in a minority and punching down on them to make a point to the bigger boys. That's not right. And we should call it out in the playground, and I'm going to call it out right in here. I'm going to call it out by actually quoting a gentleman called Richard Tice. Now, Richard Tice, you might have heard of him. He's a major shareholder in something called Reform UK Limited. He's got a nice place in Dubai. He might invite you for the weekend. Now, he was questioned as to why the leaflets for his political group had claimed they were going to reduce council tax, when in the real world, they hadn't delivered any council tax savings, let alone cut people's taxes. And his immediate response was, we didn't make that promise. Well, then when confronted with the leaflets, he then said, but haven't you heard of inflation? Well, clearly the inflation in Worcestershire is rather large. It's up to about 9% at the moment. But at the moment in the UK, inflation is 3.4%. So actually, all we're really arguing about here is round about 0.5 of 1%. That's the only thing that's differing any of this. So frankly, you know, there's no detail in here. I'm taking no lessons from it, and I'm certainly taking no lessons from a party that has upped the council tax to the maximum in Kent while spending £600,000 on a car park for the leader of the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Now, we have 4 more speakers, and we have the seconder of the motion, and we have Councillor Smith still to go. So let's keep going, and then we'll have a break. Thank you. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, fellow councillors. I will keep this brief. I would like to actually thank Reform UK for bringing forward this hideously ill thought out and scant of detail amendment today, and especially for their literally incredible contribution to this debate today. Today they have shown our Suffolk residents, in their words, our shareholders, the true reality of what you get when you vote for Reform UK. Absolute chaos and policy based on fairy tale. For these reasons, I will not be supporting this nonsensical non-amendment which lacks any detail, any depth, or any fiscal responsibility.
Thank you. Councillor Spicer.
Madam Chairman, sorry I was a bit late putting up my hand, but I felt it was important that you realised that in the days of Colin Noble, he's still here.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor.
Now, he referred to having been through 19 budget debates. This is my 37th, I think. Please don't take up my precious 3 minutes doing that. But actually, we ought to thank Reform, because I've never seen so much unity across this chamber as I've seen in the last hour, which is great. Right. So there is a sort of ritual about these debates. And I've heard the references to budget amendments on the back of a fag packet more than once over the years. But at least when people put them on the back of a metaphorical fag packet, they did put some sums in, they put some money in, figures, as well as the health warning that you get on all fag packets. But when I saw this amendment 2 days ago, or whenever it popped up, I thought, where's the money? But I luckily was able to read in the paper today what Councillor Hudson had to tell us. He told the press today he did not know how many redundancies would be required, and he didn't know how much money would be saved. And that, Madam Chairman, is rather tragic as well, because we can't take this seriously, can we? But it's been a very interesting debate, and can I thank everybody for their contributions? Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I said I'd keep it to a minute, so I will. I want to talk about working from home because no one else has touched on it. Because it reminded me of something that I saw online a few days ago. And so I did a little Google and I found 4 job listings, all are regional campaign and training manager for Reform UK. £35,000 to £40,000 a year, that's not bad. Location, home working with occasional travel in the region. I suggest one of you try and take up one of those roles next time they come up, because this clearly isn't your specialty.
Thank you everyone. Thank you all councillors. Councillor Faircloth-Mutton, you now have 5 minutes to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies for the hoarse voice, but I am recovering from a cold, hence the pint of water that I've got before me, and my absence from this scrutiny meeting the other day, just to put that on record. As I have today, yes, I am here. I have returned to work today, yes. Thank you. Inflation busting, triple lock pension busting, wage increase busting, 4.99% council tax increase from this Tory administration. This budget doesn't share the proceeds of fiscal management, sound fiscal management with Suffolk residents. Our adult social care precept proposals would be 2%. It should be. It is our biggest spend. It is our statutory spend. It is necessary to continue to increase it. by 2%. However, the base council tax increase can be 1% lower, as we are proposing in our amendment. I saw a uni-party evidence today with the Labour Party not submitting their own amendment, and then, of course, no amendment from the Green, Lib Dem and Independent group. Well, bloody hell, it's like a quad party thing, isn't it? Yeah, I rescind the word bloody. I know at heart Councillor Smith is a low-tax, low-spend Conservative. The first speech of today was indeed the words of Councillor Smith, but it was from the mind of Councillor Hicks's high-tax, high-spend Conservative administration. A departure from true conservatism of heavy lifting and sharing the proceeds of hard work with Suffolk's residents. Outside of the adult social care sphere, this council remains heavily outmoded when it comes to technology, and we are overmanned. We are years behind the private sector when it comes to AI and the use of artificial intelligence in day-to-day tasks. That needs to change. Our businesses are doing it. Why should we be no different? I've said that there would be no reduction in ASC spend. Just to put that on record, there is absolutely nothing referring to ASC being targeted in our motion. Nothing whatsoever. This motion was considered legal by the monitoring officer. It does not breach any areas of law. Otherwise, we would not be allowed to propose this in the council. There are many businesses that have done what they did not necessarily like to do in this county. National insurance has been raised, the threshold has come down, there are many more expenses. There are many things we would not like to do at Suffolk County Council, but we have to do them because our residents expect us to do just that. In 2023, the three of us, Councillor Sower, Councillor Hudson and I, we didn't vote for a maximum council tax increase. We voted for a 3.99% increase as proposed by the administration. It wasn't 4.99. The proposals to close 4 household waste sites, that was something that was never brought to the public eye. I remember I was almost in tears on the phone to Councillor Rout saying how terrible that would be to rural life. Hadley, Sudbury, Mildenhall, yes, Councillor Noble, Mildenhall near you, and Felixstowe could have been closed. What happened? Extra money was found in the form of redundancies. We didn't instruct what redundancies they were, but the money was found and those 4 household waste sites stayed open. And that was one of my proudest achievements as a councillor, to put power back into the hands of local people and make that change before it was too late. What happened to the Deputy Cabinet Member for Transformation? Both of them, those office holders, are sitting on these benches. Councillor Hicks acts that role. There is no Deputy Cabinet Member for Transformation any longer. Serious about transformation? Put a Deputy Cabinet Member back in and have a shuffle in your team when it comes up. Yes, Councillor Rout was the Cabinet Member and you had 2 deputies as well. So the other thing, 4.7 million, just to quote figures here, they're in your papers if you wondered where they came from, failed savings by this administration. You failed to deliver them last year, why can we trust you to deliver them this year? So, just to put it on record, County Durham proposed 2% council tax increase. Kent, 4%, 1% lower than the statutory limit, Councillor Stringer. We believe that Suffolk people deserve the same. We believe in greater efficiencies. We can go that one step further, not giving shopping lists of fantasy politics, go that little bit further. £4.66 million extra on Suffolk's high streets, Suffolk savings accounts, paying down debt in personal accounts, or contributions to our voluntary sector. People can spend that money where they want to, not being dictated to by Suffolk County Council Tories. Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you. I now turn to Councillor Smith, who may speak up to 5 minutes on the amendment.
Madam Chairman, we've had a very full and a fine, I think, debate on the amendment. Not the motion, the amendment. And I don't feel that I need to speak to the amendment at all. Councillor Hudson didn't, so why should I? But if we are proposing £4.6 million, receiving £4.6 million less than we anticipate in council tax, I think we should at least understand the detail of how that gap in the budget is being filled. We haven't had that, and that is a big flaw of this motion. I was going to make a big thing about grammar, but it's already been made twice. But it is a pity that a short amendment like this can't be entirely grammatical. But far more important is the effect on staff who will be listening to this and will feel little valued when the staff are our main asset, and they will be crucial to us over the next 2 years as we transform from Suffolk County Council into whatever form of unitary government we will have. I thank colleagues who have taken part. I thank them for their very telling points. I urge you to vote this amendment down to stop the hypocrisy.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your speeches on this proposal today. We will shortly move to an electronic vote on the amendment. Don't press anything on your touch screen yet. If you support the amendment, press yes. If you do not agree with the amendment, press no. Press abstain if you wish to abstain. Are you all ready? Sorry.
No, he moves the motion. No, he moves the amendment. He doesn't get a chance to speak further on the amendment? No. No. So we go to the vote. It's correct to go to the vote. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Councillor Martin, we are moving to the vote. The monitoring officer has advised that. Are you all ready? I will start the vote. Please vote now. Councillors, please ensure that your screen shows the words "your vote has been cast." Has everybody voted? I shall now close the vote. The results are for the motion 56-0. The amendment has been lost. I am now going to call for a short break for 15 minutes. So we will return at 4:25. Councillors, please take your seats. We're about to start resuming the debate on the substantive motion. Right, if everyone's ready. I'm firstly going to call on Councillor Hicks to speak on as the seconder of the motion, to speak on the substantive motion. You have 7 minutes, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And Budget Day at any council across the country actually is one of the most important days in the calendar year. A day for all councillors to reflect on what's before us. And I've said it before in this chamber, we're here today because we have enormous responsibility of looking after the many services that are delivered for the residents of Suffolk. Services people rely on. And today is no different to those previous years when we set the direction of travel as we look at how we're going to deliver those with the £850 million budget, which is a huge amount of money that is before us today. Now, government funding has increased, but only slightly. So we need to be realistic and fully transparent, because in essence, we are receiving less. But, of course, we're always expected to deliver more with rising demand. Despite that, before us is a budget that is realistic, it's balanced, it's acknowledging the increase in demand, and does not compromise our responsibilities to Suffolk's residents. It doesn't put in any difficulty the livelihoods of those that rely on our services, and I think that is where this differs to the previous amendment. We do that every single day. We support our residents at their time of need, and that is no small achievement. Now, Madam Chairman, of course, this is the second to last budget of this authority that we will ever set. And I strongly hope that in due course a new single unitary council will be setting its first budget. But whatever decision the government makes on local government reorganisation, it will not be a silver bullet. Many of the pressures that we face are systematic and they will require national reform. The SEND system is a clear example of that, and government has promised to reform, but without clear detail or timetable currently. That makes long-term planning difficult, while costs continue to rise. Next year, we'll spend £8.9 million simply servicing the interest on the dedicated schools grant. That's £8.9 million that could have been spent on roads, libraries, and all those other services that we hear about so often. Supporting young people, supporting those most in need. Now, the government has announced on the DSG this week, and that announcement is very welcome. But it doesn't fix the problem. It only covers 90% of the current deficit and only until 25-26. We don't actually even know the requirements of the local SEND reform plan that we'll be expected to deliver in order to get that funding. And we don't know what support there'll be going forward for the deficit over the next 2 years. So the pressure on our budget is slightly less, but let's be really clear, it is still very real. Now, of course, Labour have a strong track record of U-turns, and I, at home last night, was trying to count how many it was. I got up to 12. But I really hope that we see a root and branch reform of SEND, so that those that are most in need and deserve it get the service they require. I really hope that this SEND reform that we've heard so much about does not come U-turn number 13. This highlights a wider truth that everyone in this chamber understands. Councillor budgets are stretched thin, and our room for manoeuvre locally is very limited. Most of the solutions really lie with government, and that is a huge risk, I believe, with the current government. What is clear is what government expects from us. Their finance settlement assumes that councils will raise the council tax by the maximum amount allowed, and if we do not do that, we risk losing future grant funding. And that is funding we simply cannot afford to lose.
And let me also be clear, passing costs to local taxpayers is also wrong. Rural counties like Suffolk already receive much less government funding per person than metropolitan areas, despite the higher costs we have to go through to deliver those important public services. So we need to be honest with our residents about why this is happening. We are raising council tax reluctantly, not because this council has spent recklessly, but because national funding no longer reflects the true cost of delivering services. Council tax was never designed to fund the growing cost of social care and SEND, and asking local taxpayers to carry that burden indefinitely is fundamentally unfair. Suffolk needs fairer funding, not unfair funding. Madam Chairman, my colleagues in Cabinet have will, in the next few, minutes, maybe hours, detail much of their own budget positions for us today. But can I just take this opportunity also to thank Councillor Smith, obviously we're having a bit of a friendship thing here, for all your hard work. My thanks to all of Cabinet, actually, for all the work you've done, and to all my colleagues on this side of the chamber, because this process started a long time ago. It actually started in June, and it takes a long time to get to today. And that's because we pull together, work together, and do what's best. So thank you to you all. As we enter the final years of this authority, we have a responsibility not just to balance this year's books, but to do what we can to leave a stable financial position for whatever the governance structure might be going forward. Madam Chairman, colleagues, this isn't an easy budget, but it's an honest budget. It protects the services our residents rely on, and it meets that ongoing rising demand. So I commend this budget to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I will now call on Councillor Andrew Stringer as the main opposer. You may speak for up to 15 minutes.
Opposite should be sorry, main opposition speaker. Main opposition.
Sorry, just to clarify, there was a typographical error. And I would never call you an opposer normally.
A fellow traveller. Shall I speak now? Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Because we've used a template, it sort of throws up some odd things, because over the years I have been the main opposer to the budget. And of course, it has been noticed, of course, with some foul language, that this group hasn't put an amendment to your budget this year, similar to last year. But that's not a lack of ambition on our behalf. That's not a lack of work in looking at the figures. That's not a lack of attending the scrutiny committees. Take note. To thrash this through and make sure we're doing the best we can. It's a realisation of where we are. So today is going to be an incredibly rare day. I'm going to say things like, I agree with Councillor Hicks. I'll probably even agree with Councillor Noble. Drink it in, it's a very rare vintage, all right? So purely because the way we've got to here, in the way we've constructed local government finance, it is frankly becoming rapidly unsustainable. And for us to even tinker with some of this, as you can do something meaningful, it's not worth really putting an amendment, frankly. If you're just going to tinker with a few £100 here and there, it makes no difference. In fact, if you then try to do something radical with this budget, it would actually be reckless. And we've heard that word several times today, and I honestly believe it would. When you've got a Section 151 officer, I can almost feel her breath down the back of my neck, suggesting that we are within a couple of £1 million of having less than the reserve that we ought to have, that does bring you up sharp. When you have cost pressures, such as the dedicated school grant, that is now forecast in some of these papers to be almost £1/3 billion, should never have been there in the first place. I at least thank this government for actually recognising it, and they need to address it. But as I say, I hope they hold to that and actually follow through and make sure it does work. Because it needs to, because it's taking councils down, and it's actually obliterating the reason we came here in the first place. We came in the first place not to argue, well, some of us did, but to actually deliver services and make the life chances of those we serve the better. The more that takes away from us, the more that makes us less of a councillor and actually less of a council and less people. So I do welcome that. But I genuinely worry, even though I don't sit on those benches, about the state of our finances, which is why over the years we have been critical of you, and here's where we part company, that we feel you should have taken some of those smaller rises in earlier years. You'd have been about £9 million better off now. That's not a huge amount of money, but it would keep that reserve level a little bit more buoyant. Would have even been able to have probably charged less than 1% less than we are doing this time this year. So, you know, I don't revel in the 4 successive years, although I am part of an administration here which has not put council tax up by a single percent in last year, and that was a nice thing to be able to pass on. But governments have woke up to that, and we certainly won't be able to do that this year, but it won't be as much as this. Interesting, the references to Darwin and tortoises in the speech. I thought it was quite a nice, see, I spotted the Darwin and the tortoise link. That was good. But I always found it really curious about Darwin. You're a bit of a historian, you quite know. I always found that the guy that wrote The Origin of the Species and the Theory of Natural Selection married his cousin. I always thought that was a really odd thing. Now, there's a whole raft of Suffolk jokes in there and Norfolk jokes, and we're not going to go anywhere near them, all right? I've signed the Code of Conduct, and I will abide by the Nolan principles. So, but yeah, to be very, very serious, I'd say I personally will be supporting the administration's budget. I will encourage my group to do that, but we don't whip, unlike others, and they're free to vote as their conscience see fit. But I always think if we haven't got a viable work-through alternative, that we shouldn't oppose the budget, because we have to set one, and frankly, this is the best of a bad job. But I think it highlights something we should probably ought to do, and actually probably get together and recognise that the system doesn't work, and that we should possibly be all lobbying for a local income tax, because that surely would be the most fair way to allocate this tax. But also, before I disappear, I just want to make a note about the carbon budget. I would think everyone in this house would have a separate vote about the carbon budget. What a good idea. Thank goodness we took that bold step, and I thank you for taking that bold step a few years ago, because had we not have taken the steps to pursue our carbon budget, we wouldn't have made those £4.5 million savings a year. We would already be writing to the Secretary of State saying we're in trouble. So anyone telling you that net zero is all going to cost everyone a fortune, well, perhaps it won't, because already it's saved this council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. I am going to be calling on the leaders of the other groups. The Labour group, Councillor Martin, you may speak for 5 minutes. I will then be calling on the leader of the Fulham group, who may speak for 5 minutes, and then I will be opening the debate up to the floor. Councillor Martin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The core funding identified in the budget papers laid before the Cabinet on the 27th of January was £850 million, an increase of almost £40 million on last year. Of that, £9 million is the increase in revenue support grant from the government, net of consolidated grants. And there's a further £7.7 million in additional government grants, almost £16 million additional from the government to support our budget this year. And that was before we got the good news on the 9th of February that there would be an additional £5 million in revenue support grant as a result of the business rate baseline changes. And even better news, that 90% of the dedicated schools grant debt would be written off, saving this authority millions from the autumn onwards. And last year's core funding budget was an increase of over £50 million in comparison with the 24-25 budget. So how does that compare to the past? The 2019-20 budget saw a £14 million decrease in revenue support grant. In 2020-21, it went up by 1.6%, well below inflation. In 21-22, the overall income went up by £41 million, but 14.7 million of that was specifically to deal with COVID. The remainder was just 26.3 million. In 22-23, revenue support grant increased by just £519,000, and in 23-24, it was just 1.7 million. 1.7 million extra in government support in the last year of the last Conservative government, in comparison to over £21 million this year. So, would we like this council to be able to spend more on roads, on social care, on helping struggling families, and on early intervention for children with special needs? Yes, of course we would. And we believe that despite all the good intentions and the warm words, that this council is still not investing enough of its limited funds in prevention, rather than in trying to deal with the symptoms of the problems that Suffolk people face. Too many children are still not getting early enough interventions. Too many vulnerable older people are still not getting all the support they could to live safer and healthier lives at home. So we won't be supporting this budget because not all the priorities in it are ones we would have followed. And would we like less financially secure residents to be able to pay less council tax? Yes, again, yes, of course we would. And we would like the council tax profile to be aimed far more at those with enough money to be able to afford to pay. That sort of reform, alas, of the council tax system is not in our hands. But to suggest that this council is being starved of funds by the current government is demonstrably untrue, especially when you compare it to the 14 years of Conservative austerity which we are only now beginning to drag ourselves out of. I look forward to the new unitary councils in Suffolk being properly funded and delivering the services that Suffolk people need and want. But until we get there, let's acknowledge that this council, like everyone else, will have to work within its means, and let's support the hard-working council staff who've managed against all the odds to keep everything going for so long.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I call on Councillor Hudson, leader of the Reform Group. Councillor, you have up to 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. We're not here necessarily to scrutinise anything in reform. We're here to change it. Very simple. I'm not very happy with the way things are supposedly run at the moment, the amount of expense that goes on, the amount of waste that goes on. Yes, it's a tragedy that the so-called government that we have now is wasting money. Since Starmer's been in charge, 65,000 illegal migrants have arrived here. On the boats, it costs a fortune. Why isn't that money coming to Suffolk? I think my grandma told me charity begins at home, not on the English Channel. So there are millions of pounds being wasted by a government that doesn't have any clue. So don't talk about reform or having policies. The money is being starved to this council because of a government that does not spend its money correctly. Furthermore, the Uni Party that we've heard in evidence today has no notion at all that it's possible to save. You're not even listening to the voters, not listening to the polls. Consistently, reform is leading in the polls. You should really listen to that. It isn't a joke. You'll take the mickey out of the voters at great cost. They've had enough. They're sick of paying, and they're sick of paying too much. Sound a bit Cromwellian, but you sit here too long and do no good. And of course the government's even wised up to that. That's why it's abolishing you. The reason it's abolishing you isn't money. It'll do anything but get rid of the ECHR, which would save a fortune overnight. So we sit here and play the game, sit on the fence, as it were, as it used to say, until the stakes go through our heart, watching our colour televisions, eh? You're wasting time and you're wasting the people's money. They've had enough. They haven't got any more money to waste on your bloated, stupid policies. They can't afford it. Listen. In God's name, listen. However, let's look at the... Laugh all the way to defeat. Now then, the people can't afford you, in a nutshell, is what we're saying. And if that happens enough, and enough people listen to it, you've still got time to change. Allow people to keep their own money. We cannot afford this vast expense that we're going ahead. And this budget willy-nilly goes ahead, and my colleagues will make the points later about the amount of money that's going to be spent on absences which may be legal, absences which we could look at again. We really can't keep going ahead and spending. It isn't worked out on the back of a fag packet. It's hard economic facts that people are facing every day in their lives when they shop, when they deal with things. They haven't got the money. A 5-minute walk around the streets of Ipswich would tell you that. And the fact that so many of our fellow citizens are really up against it. We were asked to answer this lovely question from the government on capacity. Would we have more capacity if we got rid of the elections for a year? Yes, we'd certainly have more capacity.
Councillor Hudson,
yes.
Can you keep your remarks focused on the budget, please, if possible?
I'll keep them laser focused on saving money and the budget. If we had been able to answer the question fully and realise that democracy has a cost, we could have saved money in this budget. As it was, we've got rid of the opportunity to bring new people in and to spend money differently. Because we've answered the capacity question, but Councillor Hicks in his wisdom didn't put a rider in at the end and say, process should never beat democracy. We want our votes. That is the message, and that's the one that's difficult to put a price on, but it would affect the price that's there. That's what people want to know about. They're not getting the answers, but that's the fact. So, we answered the question to save money, but we denied the people a vote, which has cost a fortune. You don't strangle democracy, it costs too much, as you'll learn. How much more money would we have then if we had been a little more careful, in exactly how we had decided to spend our money? And if we'd given people the chance to give us a new mandate, it isn't about me resigning or any one of us. We weren't given the chance to stand for election, all of us. I'm not in the business of competitive elections for 1 year. That would waste money. All of us resign, we might get somewhere.
Councillor,
thanks for your support.
Thank
you, Madam Chairman, and good night.
Next, we have, we're opening the debate to the floor. Please, councillors, if you have spoken on the amendment, try not to repeat points already made. We have a list of councillors now to speak, and I call on Councillor Hopfensperger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Setting budgets never gets easier, and this year is no exception. There is never enough money to do everything we would like to do. We rightly prioritise the essentials and our statutory duties. But that inevitably means there is less available for the non-statutory nice-to-haves, and those extra touches that can make a real difference to our communities, whether in highways, environmental improvements, or yes, in adult social care. In Suffolk, we are fortunate. Councillor Sower, Councillor Hudson, we have an officer team that is relentlessly committed to improving and modernising adult social care. Led by our Executive Director, Gareth Everton, our teams are constantly, sometimes daily, developing better, more efficient ways of working. They never compromise on quality, but they continue to deliver transformation savings worth millions of pounds. Those savings enable us to reinvest not only within adult social care, but across the entire authority. Yet some in this chamber are content to now peddle their party's national myth that officers are idle, overpaid, obstructive bureaucrats. But it is absolutely not in my experience here in Suffolk. After more than a decade as a cabinet member, I can say with confidence that we are served by dedicated professional teams who care deeply about the people they support. I want to place on record my sincere thanks to them and to our Chief Executive for her unwavering support over the years. Her leadership has been vital in helping us deliver good quality care for those who need it most. And I'm sad to see her leave her post, and I wish her all the best for the future. Madam Chairman, while some groups this afternoon offer up jester amendments which do nothing to address the real economic challenges we face, the reality is simple. The single biggest improvement to local government finances would be fairer, sustainable funding from central government and a clear, credible plan for the future of adult social care. Instead, since taking office in 2024, the Labour government have shelved progress, promised much and delivered nothing. And today we see a party more focused on navigating the latest Starmer drama than addressing the growing cracks in adult social care that millions of people rely on. Every day wasted on Labour's internal problems is another day local authorities are left to carry the burden of their inaction alone. Madam Chairman, I believe this is a responsible, balanced and deliverable budget, and I'll be certainly supporting the motion.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor Lukaniuk. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is relevant to the budget. Only this morning I left an opening. There was an open day for a special needs facility for children in Elvedon. That's part of my division. This is a dedicated school for speech therapy for the kids. I was much impressed with the build quality of the school and the facilities. Apparently delivered by Suffolk County Council. That's us, Madam Chair. So I will be voting for the motion. But the gentleman at the top of the table there, he did refer to his amendment only a few minutes ago. So I'm just going to go back to that very briefly. But this piece of paper, Madam Chair, if it was a little bit more absorbent, I would find another use for it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bobby Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next year, we are proposing a budget of £227 million to support our children and young people services. Like many councils across the country, we are experiencing tough financial challenges, largely because the cost of finding the right care for children with complex needs has increased exponentially. It's a national challenge, more children needing specialist support, and there simply aren't enough options. Despite these pressures, Suffolk still has one of the lowest costs per child in care in the country, and that is no mean feat. And we owe that largely to our foster carers. Our foster carers are at the heart of what we do, and they are so much more than just skilled professionals. They are the people that provide stability and love every single day. And whilst I welcome the recent government announcement that focuses on recruitment, we are just as focused on retention. We value the wisdom and experience that our current carers bring to the table, giving children the childhood they deserve. To every single one of you who foster for Suffolk, thank you. Part of our long-term plan to reduce the amount we are spending on high-cost external placements involves the building of our own local homes, like the new Drew Provision site in Saxmundham. It takes time to get these registered and ready, but these will provide good care for our children, keep our children close to home, and bring down the average cost of care. This budget includes £15.4 million specifically to cover the rising costs and demand associated with our children in care and children with disabilities. And we're also moving forward at pace with our Families First programme, investing £1.9 million to redesign how we help families. This will support more children to stay safely within their own family networks wherever possible. We've identified £12.2 million in savings, partly through corporate savings, and by working with partners like Empower to make better decisions about care packages, making sure that each child has the right care at the right time and in the right place. And finally, I want to thank our finance team, our Director of Children's Services, our Chief Exec, and every single member of the team. This budget is about balancing high demand with high standards of care that our families deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, well, thank you, Madam Chairman and Councillor Finch. My responsibilities within the Children and Young People's Directorate span education and learning, inclusion, school travel and schools. Together, these services are central to our ambition to give every child and young person in Suffolk the best possible start in life. An ambition, though, that has brought growing financial pressures. As Councillor Bennett has inferred, the budget before members proposes an increase of 12.6 million for 2026-2027, a 5.9% increase reflecting rising demand and unavoidable cost pressures. A significant pressure within my area, and touched on already, is the dedicated schools grant. This week, the government announced plans in the final settlement to cover most of that deficit. And Councillor Martin, we do welcome that decision, as it will reduce the cost of carrying this debt. However, the Council remains responsible for 10%, 16.8 million, and we do not yet know how future deficits will be supported. Now, as Councillor Hicks has said, we also need urgent detail on what will be required through the local SEND reform plan, and we hope the government's forthcoming schools white paper will provide more clarity. Until we have that detail, there are no plans to change how the dedicated schools grant is financed in the ensuing financial year. Now, turning to SEND, pressures continue locally and nationally. However, progress is being made. Last year, we published a comprehensive SEND need assessment and improvement plan, strengthening provision and improving consistency. We continue to work closely with partners and parent carers, recognising that not all families are yet feeling the impact. Now, the budget includes targeted SEND investment. First, £5 million to address demand and inflationary pressures in home-to-school transport, alongside cost reduction work. £1 million to expand the educational psychology workforce. And third, £500,000 for Activities Unlimited, providing respite support. Alongside this, the CYP budget, as has been said, includes 12.2 million of savings for next year, delivered through service transformation and reduced employer pension contributions, while protecting frontline services wherever possible. Madam Chairman, this budget recognises the scale of demand, particularly in SEND, while taking responsible steps to stabilise our position and plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to comment from my perspective, from my portfolio, property and county farms. Property underpins almost every service we provide, and where public service actually happens, such as schools, fire stations, libraries and depots. Property team manage a significant and complex estate with professionalism and realism. They continually review how buildings are used, where costs can be reduced, and how assets can support both a budget and our communities. It's easy to talk about savings and receipts when a building is sold. That is visible and makes a headline. It's harder to recognise the savings that come from preventing costs in the first place. By rationalising underused space, addressing maintenance early, improving compliance and investing in energy efficiency, whether through insulation, LED lighting or smarter heating systems, the team reduce our exposure to rising energy prices and long-term liabilities. Those are not one-off gains. They are recurring benefits. They strengthen the revenue position year after year. That is transformation in action, delivering. We've also moved from being purely an owner-occupier authority to a more flexible position, part owner and part landlord. That reflects careful strategic thinking about generating income, reducing liabilities, and making better use of public assets. Importantly, decisions are not based solely on the highest capital receipt. There is a balanced approach to weighing financial return against wider community benefit. That is something I strongly support. County farms are an important and historic asset. These farms support rural businesses and provide opportunities for new entrants into agriculture. Managing them responsibly contributes to both our rural economy and our financial resilience. So I want to place on record my thanks to the officers who manage property and county farms. Their work strengthens this budget and supports the long-term resilience of Suffolk County Council. And today, while we rightly discuss financial pressures, it's important to recognise delivery. In Haverhill, I welcome the investment in the Waste and Recycling Centre and the recently opened Relief Road, a vital piece of highways infrastructure. Lots of residential roads have been resurfaced. While I continue to lobby for more, it's important not to understate these investments. They matter to residents. While Reform UK, by implication, attack the work of our hard-working officers in all directorates, who are striving to find cost savings and delivering statutory services, I'm embarrassed that they've had to listen to such vile rhetoric, and I thank the officers for their dedication in challenging times. I support the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just quickly want to say a personal thank you, woman to Nicola Beach. I was going to send that in an email, but I think it's necessary under the circumstances of what's been said today. I was experiencing, obviously, effectively stalking, and if it wasn't for Nicola and Colin Noble, I wouldn't have had a safety process in place, and I just want to personally thank you for everything you did for me to make me safe in this chamber. Someone said to me just before this, give them hell, because they had an expectation that I was going to proper boot you because I'm sitting over here as an independent. I'm not whipped. Well, even when I was sitting there, I spoke for myself anyway. Let's be honest. But I'm not going to give you hell on this. I didn't know how I was going to vote because I totally understand that no one has any money right now. I mean, I've just taken an extra job because I'm as skint as anyone else, and I'm overworked now. But I'm now working in a special unit in a school that was newly opened. I have spent my days off supporting families with EHCP annual reviews. My whole life is SEND, as you well know. So I can't really, in good faith, vote against an increase when I know that there's so many issues here. I also saw a robotic cleaner in our cafe area, and actually it freaked the life out of me, but it also made me feel quite sad, and that's all I can think about, because if that's the transformation, that's taken away a job from a resident that could be, because we're not just a council, we're also an employer. And so with the debate that's going on with some of the amendments, is that the alternative? Is what we do is we just make our residents unemployed, and then how does that help our residents either? I have written a bingo list of elections, boats and immigration, and I think every time that all three is said in the speeches by Reform UK, we should just all shout bingo, because it has no substance here, but it is said all the time here. I also, for journalists and anyone that's watching live, because get a live for a start, but also I watch it live, I just want to remind what the dear Queen said once was, recollections may vary. And so when there will be future comments about what has been said in a private group meeting, recollections may vary on what has been said, because there is no evidence, and we can all stand up and say that this was said. And then just a final reminder, I will be voting in favour of this increase, because I think at a time when we're going through serious government reform, we need to have a really financially strong government council to go into whatever, 1 or 3 or maybe 2 if David Nettleton gets his way. But finally, Margaret Thatcher once said there is no such thing as public money, there is only taxpayers' money. So whether we talk about government money or whether we talk about council money, it is our money, the taxpayer. It doesn't matter how it comes, they're going to need that money, and whether we increase it or not, it will come through the government anyway, through other taxes. So with a sad heart, I think this is the responsible thing, is to vote in favour of this budget this one time.
Councillor Wiles.
Thank you, Chair. And what an interesting afternoon. I think we can all agree the budget presented today is set in a tough and complex circumstances. Public finances remain tight. Demand continues to rise. And the national funding settlement, well, anything but generous. And yet, we still have a responsibility to deliver safe, reliable services for the people of Suffolk. So, looking at the budget from a public protection and public health perspective, I'd like to highlight just a few key points. On public health, the £38 million ring-fence grant, which is 78% of the Directorate's budget, supports vital preventative work aimed at helping people live healthier lives, reducing inequalities and easing pressures on the NHS and social care. Public health programmes are often delivered in partnership and tailored to the many local needs. From substance misuse services to smoking cessation and employment support, for instance. We are informed that next year brings changes in funding. Several specific grants of around 2.9 million will be rolled into the main public health grant, ensuring continued support for these services. However, while the grant increases by 1.1 million, we still need to draw down 0.8 million from reserves to balance the budget. This is a responsible approach, maintaining vital services during financial pressures. Turning to public protection, Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service faces in-year pressures through Q3, these reflecting pay inflation and incident complexity. The budget presented protects frontline fire cover, maintains response capability and continues prevention work. The capital programme element continues to focus on essentials such as safe facilities, reliable equipment and resilient infrastructure. Trading standards and public protection services tackle harm, supporting residents and businesses. These are preventative services, stopping harm before it happens, tackling rogue traders, scams and unsafe products, protecting vulnerable residents and supporting legitimate businesses. That, ladies and gentlemen, is true value for money and clearly aligns with the Council's stated objectives. As we prepare for local government reorganisation, core safety services will remain stable and dependable. Madam Chairman, thank you for the extra few seconds. I believe the budget presented today serves Suffolk people well, and for that reason, I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be very quick. First point I want to note is the amount of ad hominem attacks we've had this afternoon as reform. So that very often happens when somebody hasn't got a proper defence. The most egregious was Councillor Rout calling us all deceivers. But, you know, we're tough. Pardon? Okay. So, okay, point of clarification. Two of us are deceivers. I'm not sure about the other two. So, anyway, the point is we're all thick-skinned. We can deal with that. But let me just point out, people keep talking about the people in the council. We equally admire the folks in the council who work as officers. I had a considerable amount of help from Lou Ainsley and Andrew Philby, I believe it is, to put my numbers together. I'm very, very grateful, and I admire their professionalism. But let me say, the issue we're discussing is about product, process, and people. And for your own purposes, you keep talking about people because you won't address the issue of product and process. So I'll leave it at that. Just the last point I want to say is that my belief is that the budget's been put together using the transformation numbers as a way of balancing the budget. We've seen this year we failed to deliver on 4.7 million, and I suspect we're going to fail next year. It's just used as a device. It's not genuine. And that's what I think a serious issue. That is perhaps deceptive. The fourth thing I want to make is that we have two-tier Tories here. The fault line is Is it statutory? Isn't it? If it's statutory, wave it on through, let's do the best to manage it. If it's not statutory, then we'll squeeze it till the pips come out. So I talk later on about a resident who's fallen over, and I've been requested to mention it this afternoon. But things like highways, things like paving, in my division, people are suffering. Because it's not statutorily protected, they are suffering. So you're not serving the whole community, and I need to draw your attention to that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got 3 minutes, so I'm just going to raise 3 subjects, a minute each from my portfolio area, and I hope to touch on processed product as well as people. Starting with people first, can I thank Councillor Smith for the incredible amount of time he puts into the budget, along with these officers. He's already thanked them, but let me thank him. I'll also thank you, Councillor Smith, for your comments in saying you might have a conversation about a bit more money for highways, given the good news from the government. And I shall be having that conversation with you with great sort of anticipation. In terms of product, we were at scrutiny very recently, and I think discussed it in the budget scrutiny, but also on Tuesday at Lowestoft, the great success of the Gull Wing Bridge that the council put funding towards, along with the previous Conservative government. And we're very pleased in one respect that the revenue cost that we're paying to that goes towards serving the people of Lowestoft in having a long-awaited solution to their congestion. In terms of the capital, a lot has been in the news recently after the government's letter, but just to confirm, over the last 2 years we've spent £87 million of capital after receiving, over that same time, £78 million from the government. So we're spending in capital more in the last 2 years than we received from the government. And finally, perhaps sort of process. Many years ago we discussed the process of how we made more efficient Suffolk street lighting, and over the last 13 years we've invested a total of £15 million of capital, and over the last 13 years cumulatively we've saved revenue of £40 million. Money well spent, not only net zero, a net saving to the council that I think possibly we could all rally behind. I'm perhaps not sure of all, but I think most of us could rally behind. 6 million revenue that is saved in this year that would have otherwise been spent had that capital investment not been made during the last 12 years. And I conclude by saying I fully support the budget put forward by my colleague, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take these off because they're broken and they keep falling off. Let me start by saying that I will begrudgingly support this. And I say begrudgingly not because I disagree with it, but because I couldn't come up with a better alternative. As a council, we're struggling, and we need to continue the services that have been mentioned, children and young people, highways, filling those potholes, maybe even resurfacing some of the roads. Everything that we cover needs to continue while we still exist. If I can get personal, just briefly, my family, my household, we fall into the jam category, just about managing. And because our taxable income is just above the threshold, we don't get council tax support. So this will negatively affect our household, as it will many others. And I do apologise to everyone in similar categories. But although it may be awful for a while, hopefully in the future, council tax won't continue to rise. So I would just like to apologise to everyone for the increase if it does go through, but it is just necessary. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. 77% of our budget supports vital social care, but the remaining 23% can be a catalyst for the future. This is where we're driving the innovation, connectivity and housing that will secure Suffolk's economic resilience for decades to come. In transport, we're focusing on the A12 corridor as a critical economic engine. We're advancing a £63 million infrastructure project. Lost where I am. £63 million infrastructure project to support the energy coast, ensuring the network can accommodate the construction of Sizewell C, and as well as other energy projects along the east coast as the UK transitions towards clean energy. In passenger transport, we've secured £26 million through to 2029. And this year alone, we're investing £8.8 million to enhance bus networks, sustaining 40 plus routes launched since 2024, upgrading to real-time passenger information and transitioning to zero-emission electric fleets. Our planning strategy ensures this growth is sustainable, and the Suffolk Minerals and Waste Plan secures a 10-year supply of minerals needed to build our schools and homes. And we're also working hand in hand with district and boroughs as they update their local plans to meet the increased housing targets, which have surged from 3,000 to over 5,000 homes per year. And finally, our housing joint venture, Edmundum Developments, is delivering on its 15-year promise. And we're halfway, and I'm pleased to say that we're halfway through our construction of Astley Place in Newmarket. And these 50 energy-efficient homes feature air source heat pumps as standard, which ensures residents feel the benefit of cheaper bills. Furthermore, we're officially gained planning consent for the land west of Mildenhall, and this flagship project will deliver 1,300 homes, a new primary school, and an 80-bed care facility integrated with the Mildenhall hub. Whether it's for bins on our streets or the new communities in Newmarket and Mildenhall, our strategy is clear. We're building for the environment, the economy, and most importantly, for our residents. I will be supporting this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Rudd. Councillor, I believe you are the last speaker before we sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Smith. He holds a very, very difficult role, one that I've held in the past. And budgets, as Councillor Hopfensperger has said, never get any easier. And I think as we look ahead to local government reorganisation, whether it's 1 or 3, that inherited financial situation, albeit difficult, it is far better thanks to Councillor Smith. And as we look ahead to that and we expect a decision in March, I very much hope it's one council and we see that £40 million annual saving delivered that allows us to invest in things like highways. And I'll agree with Councillor Robinson here that those statutory services, the demands they place on us, do erode what we can put into highways. And I'm very pleased to hear that Councillor Smith has said he's looking at every possible way with Councillor West to put some extra money into our highways service. But where I'll disagree with Councillor Robinson, and this might come as uncomfortable news to him, that local government reorganisation, getting us there, will take more staff, not fewer. We've been very honest about that the work of either aggregating or disaggregating councils will take more staff before we can actually take staff out and deliver those savings. Turning to my other areas, Madam Chairman, nationally significant infrastructure projects, largely funded by something called planning performance agreements, but the strain from solar farms might begin to put pressure on our budgets there, and I do hope that those solar developers fund us adequately. Turning to my responsibilities around the environment, Councillor Smith set out in much more detail than I have time for how the carbon budget has delivered savings here, £4.5 million, and I think that's reflective of an investment programme that places pragmatism over ideology and ensures real savings for the taxpayer. Before I conclude, Madam Chairman, in defence of, I think, our transformation programme here at Suffolk County Council from Councillor Sower, I would like to just give you a couple of quotes from someone. And it's moving stuff. With all pride and all honesty, I can say this council engaged actively in transformation, especially focusing on adult social care and children and young people's services. Officers and councillors embraced changes and new ways of working. I respect this innovative and change-embracing culture very much. I am confident that we will find new ways of working effectively to ensure the best possible outcomes for our residents. Councillor Hopfensperger, February 2025.
Thank you. We have another speaker, Councillor Sower.
Thank you very much, Chair. Transformation has not been balanced the last year. And I can say this because I was Deputy Cabinet Member for Transformation. I was sitting there. At the time, adult social care, for example, was successfully transformed. Yet since then, no further progress has been made. Transformation has stalled. And even if you don't agree with that, there were only very little steps. So transformation has stalled. And it is wrong to rely on successes from the past again and again. I will vote against this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We have no more speakers, so I now call on our main opposer, spokesperson, sorry, for the opposition. Councillor Stringer has 7 minutes. No. If he wishes to speak, you have to. He has, and then Councillor.
Yeah, I'm not going to say too much though, but increasingly through this debate, it does like I'm being part of someone else's divorce, and like the best of wedding receptions, I don't remember it. So I didn't even get a goodie bag, or a favour. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, it's what an interesting debate. Sorry. With the sort of claim and counter-claim, etc., I think it's been a really interesting debate because it's been, despite the sort of knockabout and it getting sort of knocked around about trying to get sort of stuff on placards and things rather than debate what's actually in the papers, I think we've had a reasoned debate. And that even though we have absolutely fundamental differences, we can see that there is, and a phrase I used earlier when I had a quick chat with Councillor Noble, there's just no wiggle room anymore. There is no wiggle room. Now, we can try and blame you for not doing the right thing a few years ago, and we've sort of laid the groundwork for that. But equally, even if we'd have done that wiggle room would have only been about 9.5 million. So even we, the radical people that we are, can recognise that even that is not a huge amount of wiggle room, and you can't rebuild an entire taxation system to help the most needy on the basis of £9.5 million out of 8,500. So we are doing the right thing by supporting your budget. We don't agree with every part of it, of course we don't. But given the circumstances we're in, and this is likely to be the last budget we make almost solo, because there will be other pressures on us next year, I have no doubt, another sort of legislation perhaps in place that will limit us even further. So I think frankly, you've made the best out of a bad job. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor. I now turn to Councillor Richard Smith as mover of the recommendation. You have a right to reply for up to 7 minutes before we move to the vote.
I won't take 7 minutes, but thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Stringer, for the words. I agree it has been an interesting debate, and I'm grateful for the words that you have said. Now, I've listened to all, I think, 16 speakers, making notes in case there were things that I needed to respond to. And there are only 2 or 3 that I feel I do need to respond to. One is from Councillor Murray, who talked about the robotic cleaner downstairs. And I happened yesterday afternoon to be at a function in the atrium where we were awarding certificates to apprentices. Very appropriate in National Apprentice Week. Everything was going fine until suddenly we heard quite a noise off stage to the left. And it was the robotic cleaner which had suddenly started up and was making a beeline to mug me. Thank goodness the Vertas office is just a few yards away, so they came running out and stopped the damn thing, and I survived that experience. So I do have some sympathy with what you say. I want to say to Councillor Carter that I sympathise with the remarks that she has made, and I did talk about jams, those who are just about managing, at our cabinet meeting when we were discussing the budget a couple of weeks ago. I fully understand that. I've had times in my own life where it's been difficult to find the money to pay bills, and if you don't pay bills, you quickly get into difficulty. And I do realise that families with young children and with mortgages do find things difficult. And that is why I always look at the level that we propose for council tax, and if possible, to keep it as low as possible. We do have external constraints, which I've tried to explain, but I am sympathetic to you. And I would like to say to Councillor Sauer that she and I used to sit on the Transformation Board together, and it is absolutely wrong that the ACS transformation has stalled. It has gone ahead, it has achieved, not just achieved its target for this year, but overachieved that. And I have absolute confidence that ACS next year will meet its target, which is another challenging target, as will CYP. Now, I thank everybody who's taken part in this budget debate today. I've had to come to some difficult decisions, and one of the most difficult, well, not a decision, but something I have to do, is I am given this in draft form, and I have to read it. And it took me 9.5 hours one weekend to go through all of this, because I need to say to you all that I have some semblance that I know what I'm talking about, and I need to read every word of this and look at all the figures. I start with a position of confidence that it's been properly put together by our superb officers, and I thank them again. And I propose to you now that you accept this budget, because it's the best we can do, and it's a budget which will take us forward in a positive way over the next 12 months.
Councillors and those present, thank you all so much for your contributions and speakers and effort. Clearly, the budgets always seem to get more difficult, and I really just want to say for myself a huge thanks, especially to the officers behind the scenes who prepare our figures and do so much work to make this council, Suffolk County Council, just one of the best in the country. So thank you very, very much. We will shortly move to an electronic vote. Don't press anything on your touch screen yet. If you support the recommendation, press yes. If you do not agree, press no. Press abstain if you wish to abstain. Are you all ready? I will start the vote. Please vote now. Please ensure that your screen shows the word "Your vote has been cast." Has everyone voted? I shall now close the vote. The results are 54 with 4 abstentions. Thank you, everybody. Just for the clarification for anyone listening, it's 50 for, 4 abstentions and 4 against. Please wait for the gavel before leaving your seat. Please, would you take all belongings, paperwork and any rubbish with you. Place your microphone, smart card in the collection box by the exit and return your name plates. And finally, Please remember to check your pigeonholes before you leave today. That concludes the business for today's meeting.